What's up? Welcome, Patriots. I want to be really honest right out of the gate. This is the first time in 4 years that I've ever produced a live interview. Normally, when you guys have ever seen me do a podcast or an interview, it's pre-recorded, then it's edited, and then it's put out. That's not true. Actually, in 2018, I used to do a live podcast, but I had a producer back then. That was the difference. And tonight, I'm doing this completely on my own because it was a little bit of a last-minute decision to do this live interview with John Strand. And we decided, since he's going to trial in 1 week, that we'd better do it as soon as possible. And we didn't want to waste time recording it and then having it produced and put out. So tonight, friends, we are going to be joined by a man named John Strand. Full disclosure, John is somebody that I've known for several years. He actually volunteered for walkaway events throughout the years, like in 2019, 2020. He was in DC on January 6th, and we're about to get into his story. He's making the decision to go on trial, and I'm going to let him tell you all about what happened on that day and why. But I wanted to say, I guess, that, John was arrested about a week before I got arrested, along with his business partner and romantic partner, Dr. Simone Gold, and we ran into each other once in 2021. And at the time, I was really nervous about wanting to connect with anybody else who was facing charges or connected in any way with January 6th. And so I kind of just said, let's just kind of take a step back until this thing plays out. And once I got through my sentencing, we reconnected, and John has become a really good friend. In fact, oftentimes it's not unusual for us to talk every day and to talk at length because we both share a common bond of going through this pretty horrific experience together. It's something that most people can't understand. So I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. I'm going to bring him in just a moment. And, you guys know, as I've said so many times, I think one of the greatest failures that's happened on the conservative side of the aisle is that these stories are not getting told. And it's not a matter of whether or not anyone endorses or approves, we're not here tonight to say that what happened on January 6th was okay, or that it was good, or that it was just not at all. But whether somebody did something wrong or didn't do something wrong, the idea that these stories are not even being told and people aren't being given the perspective of the people who are facing charges, I think is a complete and total travesty. And so I wanted to at least allow John to come here tonight before he gets to trial for you guys to get to know him a little bit and hear his side of the story. And so with that, I'm going to bring John Strand in right now. Again, I'm live producing. John, can you hear me?
Brandon, hear you loud and clear, brother.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you here. I wish it was under different circumstances, obviously.
That's okay. We're here. That's what matters.
So I want to start off before we get into everything, because obviously people want to know about your January 6th story. They want to know what's happened to you, and they want to know why you're choosing to go to trial instead of accepting a plea deal, as most people are doing. Right. And then, of course, I'm sure people want to hear your feelings about what you think the possibility of success will be for you. And we're going to get into all of that. But what is really important to me is that people understand that you're much more than a January 6th defendant. In fact, I would argue that's a very, very, very tiny piece of who you are. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. First of all, Brandon, thank you so much for not only, facilitating this, but truly thank you for being who you are and sticking with it, even though it got really painful and really awful. But you've managed to just recognize the importance of remaining true to who you are as a human being. And so you've done that for yourself, but you've also done it for other people around you. And that includes me. And I'm very grateful for that. So that's just got to be said right off the top.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously I'm more than just a J6 defendant. First and foremost, I'm a child of God. I'm a firm believer in Jesus Christ, and I'm a Christian. And that's not just like a religious tag or anything else, but it's a very important reality of who I am and how I see the world. And second to that, I'm an American. That's my country. That's my foundation. That's my reality as a human being living in this time and place. And I'm a proud son and brother, and now an uncle. And so my family is really, really important to me. I'm Italian American, and that's like a big deal. So that's who John Strand is as a human being. I was born in California. I'm very proud of that. Lived in Los Angeles most of my adult life, as well as New York. And just to give like a quick background of like how I came to be here. My dad was a naval officer, so traveled around as a kid around the country. But I've always had a love for people, and I've always had a love for freedom and expression and creativity and exploration. So, my parents did a good job of facilitating that. I was actually mostly schooled at home. It's common in the military life, but that gave me a lot of different perspective and unusual experiences and allowed me to explore the creative side of my life. So I got into the arts as a kid and got really passionate about that. I actually got into politics a little bit as a kid too. Was working on a state legislative race in like early high school. And I found that really interesting. Intellectually, I thought I was excited about it and I was learning a lot. But I learned early on that politics is mostly a rigged game of a lot of compromise and basically playing a game instead of trying to do what's the right thing to do. And I found that very distasteful. So I kind of stepped away from that and pursued the arts more full time. So I've made my career as a fashion model, a musician, an actor in Hollywood, whatever else, everything that you can think of to do. Lived all over the country and all over the world. And that brings me up more or less to common times or current times. And I'd actually been working overseas mostly for a couple of years prior to the COVID chaos that ensued. And I'd actually just gotten back, and I was planning to go back overseas. And then the COVID crap started happening and all international flights got kiboshed. And then I realized I might not have much work for a while. And this is a totally new time in life and things are going crazy. So I just felt like maybe I need to get more involved locally and maybe I need to get more involved publicly. And I'd avoided that in terms of being public about my political beliefs, if that's how you want to phrase it. I tried not to be a political person, but I've tried to be a principled person my whole life for sure. And but I wasn't shoving that in anyone's face either. I was just living my life, trying to be true to myself and what I felt God was calling me to. And I was trying to do that in Hollywood as an actor. So it's not helpful in Hollywood as an actor to be politically, classical or conservative or constitutional or any of those things. So I wasn't preaching about that or anything. But like I said, 2020, the whole world shifted. And I was shocked by how do I say this? I was shocked by how just utterly naive and gullible people were. That's how I'll put it. The gullibility and naivete and ultimately just the complete abject stupidity that just consumed people. And I understand that fear and panic causes people to do things that they would normally do. But I was still frustrated that people were so just totally not connected to common sense. But I expected it for a week or a month. And then when it went past that period and it just extended indefinitely and people just let go of common sense like it was never going to come back again. I really have never understood how that happened. And I just couldn't stand it. It was driving me nuts. So I really felt like there was a shift in the world and in my life, and I had an opportunity to get involved in ways that I hadn't previously. And I had an opportunity to speak up and speak a little louder than I previously might have done, in those capacities. And that's what I started doing. So I started community organizing and was one of the co-leaders for the Beverly Hills Freedom Rally in Los Angeles that eventually drew 4,000 to 5,000 people a weekend in the months leading up to Trump's.
I was at a couple of those.
Yeah, they were epic. And I mean, I didn't know that was going to happen. I didn't get involved in that thinking like, oh, I'm going to lead this rally that grows to 5,000 people and President Trump's going to tweet it out. I was just thinking like, this crap is crazy. I mean, people are totally losing their mind. They're like, yeah, sure. Just lock us all up and with no end date. and I'm just thinking, no, that's not how the world works. And that's definitely not how America works.
Hey, John, I'm gonna stop you for just a second, just because we have a lot more people jumping on. Hey, for anyone who's just jumping on this live interview right now with John Strand, who is a January 6th defendant, he's so much more than that, but we're going to get into tonight a lot of the reasons why John Strand is choosing to go to trial a week from today, talk to you about his case. For anyone who's just joining us, please click the share button, share this interview. I can't say it enough. Smash the likes and hearts, throw comments in the chat. I'm going to try to keep reading your comments as we go. But guys, for everyone, whether you're on Twitter, Getter, YouTube, or Facebook, please retweet, please click share. I can't stress this enough. These stories are not going to get told. And, my audience, my reach is only so big. But if you guys keep sharing and sharing and sharing, we can reach more and more and more people. So please share, retweet, click share, and smash the likes and hearts and comments. John, please go ahead.
As Smokey the Bear says, only you can prevent censorship.
Is that what Smokey said?
That's what John Strand says, because he's a
Okay.
dope. But yeah, share that stuff, get it out there. And that's literally why I'm here and why I got involved the way that I just described. Is like I said, I was doing my own thing, and in my lane, in my career, I didn't need to be political. In fact, it wasn't helpful to be so, and it wasn't necessary for that time. So I wasn't. But it's not because I didn't believe in the things that I believe in. And then a certain time came where things needed to be said. People needed to stand up and draw a line in the sand and say, absolutely not. You're not going to shut down my business and my church and stop me from seeing my grandmother and prevent me from going to my sister's wedding and everything. Like, I'm a human being. I get to live. You don't get to qualify that or constrict that because you're afraid of getting a cold or whatever you want to call it. But absolutely not. So someone had to say something, and not enough people were talking. So I started talking. That's really the long and short of it. That's as simple as it is. And, foreshadow, we'll get more into the trial, but like, I'm going to trial essentially because someone needs to say enough is enough. Someone needs to say, no, that's not what happened, and I'm not going to let you just pretend like it is. Someone needs to say that human beings exist and have rights granted by God, and the government or newspapers or people that pretend they're presidents or whatever, like, people don't get to say you don't have rights, or you don't get to go to church or have a job or have a life. No one gets to say that. So
okay, well, let's not jump to J6 yet. So I want to take this a step at a time so that people can understand, I think, a little bit more about who you are, the type of person you are, and why this is important to you and what led to that moment. So I get a pretty clear picture from what you're saying that I think that when things escalated with COVID in 2020 and the government shutdowns and things started to feel very sort of authoritarian and
yes,
and I would say maybe a little bit illogical. I know we were being told we were following the science, but the science seemed to keep changing over and over again. And along with every new scientific change, it came more kind of authoritarian guidelines and restrictions on people's freedoms. And so it sounds like you were pretty bothered and concerned about that.
I was. I just I knew the whole COVID situation was an enormous scam from pretty much January 2020. I'm talking really early, and the reason I knew that is simply because the things that were being mentioned were just totally unreasonable with general norms. So the things that were being mentioned are like, oh, aliens might attack. Right? Maybe aliens will attack, but it's never happened so far. And if it does, I guess it'll make itself obvious, and then we'll know that aliens do exist. But so far they haven't attacked, and life still works a certain way. So when they're whispering things about like, oh, this disease is going to take over the world and we're going to have to shut everything down and lock people in their homes. I don't need to be an advanced virologist to know that that's never happened in the world before. And I don't think it's about to happen right now. I could be wrong, but like, prove me wrong. Obviously, I was never proven wrong. I've been proven right every step of the way. This was nonsense. It's ridiculous. And it's kind of easy to see where it's coming from and where it's going. People like to be in control, particularly the government. People are attracted to government to be in control. And those people have this innate desire to control other people's lives. That's kind of a tick of human nature. We get it. We've seen it throughout history, hundreds and thousands of years of examples to demonstrate this. So this isn't exactly a shock that people in government want to find reasons to convince people that they should comply with rules and remain under their control. It's human nature. But that's not how America's supposed to work. America's based on a very crystal clear, written down word for word, not that difficult to understand. It's been in existence for 250 years very successfully. This very foundational idea that all human beings are equal and special and made by God to be humans with the rights that he gave them, and no other human or government gets to take those away or step on them. That's it. So when you're whispering rumors in January of 2020, like, oh, I think they're going to lock the whole city down and the whole world down, and no one's going to be able to go anywhere or do, have their life until some government agent says otherwise. I called the bluff immediately. I said, nonsense, not happening, not going to stand for it.
So when we got to the election of 2020, what was it exactly that compelled you to want to go a part of going to Washington, D.C. on January 6th? And what was your purpose for being there?
Well, that's a great question. So my purpose for being in Washington, D.C. on January 5th and January 6th was entirely different, technically speaking, from most of the 1.5 million people that were there. Now, prior to January 6th, for a full year, I had been actively community organizing and leading this rally that drew a lot of people in my home community of Los Angeles in California. It was called the Beverly Hills Freedom Rally. Now, we specifically chose that name because that's the core mission that we had, and the foundation we really wanted to champion was liberty and freedom for people to make their own decisions and choices, including who they want to vote for. So if you want to vote for Donald Trump, awesome. And if you don't, also awesome. You're an American. You get to decide who you want to vote for. No one else should force that on you. Like, that's your choice. So we had that rally and that community organized to really honor every person for their individuality and their freedom, and to respect them, whatever their opinion was. We had Antifa show up once in a while. We had leftists show up all the time. I mean, we're in Los Angeles. There's lots of leftists there. We were in West Hollywood and Beverly Hills. There's every opinion and every version of everything you can think of. We invited all of it. We said, you should all come out here and have a great time and have great conversations and meet great people. So we invited everyone. We always operated and maintained completely lawful and peaceful activities. And we maintained a very peaceful event. There were a couple times where the Antifa tried to cause some skirmishes and problems, and Beverly Hills Police Department is awesome, and they kept things safe and orderly, and nothing else happened. So that was fine. But as far as we were concerned, we were there to be Americans and exercise our constitutional rights to speak, to think, to support each other and gather. And that's what we did. So that was my history in the previous year. And I was aware of obviously I was aware of President Trump doing what he's done for those 4 years, from 2016 when he took office until 2020. But I wasn't actually that involved politically or even paying that much attention, politically speaking. In 2018, I was modeling overseas in Asia. So it's like, whatever. I was doing my thing. But in 2020, I got home and suddenly the world went upside down, and then Trump was obviously running again. So I supported President Trump because America First from 2016 to 2020 was much better for the country than the previous administration. I mean, vastly better. The economy was great. Policies were better. The border was being protected. All kinds of things were starting to make more sense. So, I'm not really much of an advocate for the Republican Party per se. In fact, I honestly despise most Republicans because they're just enemies with, the clothing of a friend on. And I think that's just disgusting. But anyway, political opinions aren't like my strong suit or what I'm really interested in. I'm just interested in truth and justice and freedom and prosperity and peace and just good things for people and for them to have their own choices. That's what I'm interested in. So I saw President Trump's policies promoting and facilitating those good things. So I was a fan of that. But the Beverly Hills Freedom Rally was about freedom. It was about classical American values and constitutional rights, because that's the foundation that gives us all the freedom to be who we are and who we want to be. And because of the Beverly Hills Freedom Rally, and it grew, there were thousands of people coming. It was very exciting. It was very successful. It was very profound, particularly for the area that we were in. But it was just a profound moment. It was one of the most significant and large scale nucleuses of people power that we had seen in a long time in that area. And obviously lots of people were fans of President Trump or that side of the political spectrum, but it wasn't really about that. It was really about rediscovering our true humanity. and rediscovering the foundations that keep a community vibrant and healthy and inclusive and free and open to everyone. We were rediscovering that and reclaiming that because it was being taken away from us. So in fighting those things and in fighting for those things, we were bringing in some notable speakers and influencers and social advocates and civil rights advocates. And so we brought in Brandon Struck from Walkaway, which was incredible. I mean, what an incredible event and incredible energy. And I met a lot of people connected to that movement that shared the same values that I did, and also came from so many different diverse backgrounds, whether that's political or cultural or artistic or ethnic backgrounds or just whatever. It was so Americana. It was such a melting pot. And I saw that happening at the rally I was doing. I saw that from your events, Brandon, and everyone that's been following your awesome efforts for years. And I was really excited to like build on that. And then we also had other speakers, and one of them was Dr. Simone Gold, who is the founder of America's Frontline Doctors. And obviously, because, as I explained, that the beginning of this chaos that really pushed me into the fray was the total restriction of human rights and this totally insane, totally unconstitutional, totally unconscionable assault on human rights in the guise of health restrictions and lockdowns and all this total nonsense. And so I understood that to be the nonsense it was right away. But when Dr. Gold and the America's Frontline Doctors came onto the scene a little bit later in 2020, they had a massive summit on July 27th of 2020 in front of the Supreme Court steps. It went viral, broke 20 million views in like 6 hours. Never happened before. And then there was a coordinated collusion assault of big tech to erase it from the internet, synonymous kind of with what they did with Hunter Biden's laptop, where, you know, it's like in 2 minutes they all swoop in and they're like, oh, that doesn't exist, that's not real. And then you find out later, like, oh yeah, that's totally real. And so Dr. Gold and these other doctors stood on the Supreme Court steps and they said, COVID is, you know, a virus like a cold or a flu. So, okay, it is what it is, but you don't need to panic. You haven't been panicking for the last 100 years about the flu or the cold. You don't need to panic about COVID either. You just need to take care of yourself. And if you get sick, get the proper medicine for it and follow normal protocols that are sensible. And by the way, there's this medicine called hydroxychloroquine and this medicine called ivermectin, both of which have been FDA approved for decades and are on the list of safest medicines in the entire world on the WHO. And they're used all over the planet. And they happen to work for this too. So you should use them, obviously. And that got erased from the internet. And then in the months after that, it came out that everyone realizes, oh, they were telling the truth. And that's why they got erased. And so we see this pattern of the government saying, oh, you can't do what you think you are entitled to do. You can't do what the Constitution says because that's dangerous, or, you know, whatever their excuses are. And they say, we have a better idea. We have a better plan. You're going to do it our way because it'll keep you safe, or whatever their other excuse is. But the bottom line is they're just trying to impose their opinion as more important and more valuable and more authoritative than your own opinion. But again, we live in the United States of America. The whole point of this country is that you're in charge. Your opinion is the one that matters. Period. So when a government, yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, everyone who's joining us now, I see a few new people jumping on. Thank you for joining this chat. We're talking with John Strand, who is a defendant. He was charged for, I'll let him tell the story, but he was inside of the Capitol briefly on January 6th. And we're about to get into that in just a moment. If you're watching, please share this video. Click the share button. Please click retweet. If you're on Getter, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, if you're on Twitter, retweet, click share. Repost. Let's help get this story out. We're about to get into what brought John to Washington, D.C. on January 6th, what happened, and why he's making the decision to go to trial, and so much more we're going to get into in just a second. So, John, go ahead and pick up from there.
Okay. So the medical pretext was very key to the government takeover and the totalitarian advancement that was happening. Like you said at the beginning, just totalitarianism. it's everywhere, and it's just so extreme in such a short amount of time. It's shocking and it's terrible. But obviously they used medicine and a health scare as the mechanism to panic people and put them in a position of fear and vulnerability and force them into compromise and to compliance. So I was very interested in what the frontline doctors were doing. I was very excited about the tenacity and also the incredible intellect and pristine credentials and just the absolute pursuit of accuracy and transparency that Dr. Simone Gold was committed to. She was so articulate and intelligent, and she knew all of the facts, and she knows the Constitution. She's a Stanford University educated attorney, as well as being an emergency physician for 25 years. So she knows her stuff. And she's not afraid to stand on her stuff. And that's what really got me excited. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't know enough, and people need to be more educated for sure. But there are certainly some people who are educated and smart and know their stuff. There are very few people who know their stuff and will actually stand on it when it isn't comfortable or convenient, or when the government's trying to push you the other direction. Very few. I mean, you might be able to count them on your own two hands, to be honest. But Dr. Gold's one of them. And so I was able to interact with her at the Beverly Hills Freedom Rally that I was leading in Los Angeles, and was incredibly excited about the work that she was doing. And so we started collaborating on some things locally, and then she asked me to get more involved with her organization as it grew nationally. And so we were actually both working an event for Turning Point USA in Palm Beach, Florida, at the Student Action Summit. I believe that was the last week of December of 20. And Vice President Mike Pence actually spoke at that event. And this was during the very end of the election. Well, excuse me, December 2020. So the election would have already occurred, and all of the fraud related to that would have been coming to the surface in those ensuing weeks. And all of the frustration and the concern and the doubts about the validity and veracity of what was going on was on everyone's minds. Everyone was talking about that. And Vice President Pence spoke as the marquee speaker at this event and said at least 3 times, word for emphasis, "I'm going to hold the line. We will hold the line in January." That's what Pence said. I didn't even know exactly what that meant, but I knew that there was a lot of controversy about the election, and I knew that things didn't line up or make sense. And it did not seem like it was a fair or just outcome. Not at all. But what definitely was certain was that there was a lot of doubt and a lot of frustration, and that there needed to be a sufficient and a full scope, comprehensive process and an effort to bring clarity and transparency and audit the election and decide, was this correct or not, so that the whole country can understand this is what was supposed to happen or not, so that we all get behind it. The whole idea about America and democracy, which the left loves to pummel us in the face with like a hammer, the whole concept is that we're in charge, the people, we vote for who we want to represent us according to rules, and then we follow those rules. And those rules establish a fair playing field for everyone to voice their opinion in their vote. And then wherever the vote lands, we all we all unite behind that and say, okay, the process played out, and then we support the process. But if the process is fraudulent and circumvented, then all of that breaks down and no one wants to get behind it. That's just common sense and human nature. So we were at that event shortly before January 6th, and we heard Vice President Pence say those things, and those were interesting. But Dr. Gold had been booked to speak at the January 5th Freedom event and a January 6th Freedom event weeks and weeks prior. It must have been shortly after the election, but I think it was at least a month before J6 actually happened. So well in advance, she was invited by whoever was putting on the free speech rally to be a guest speaker alongside of Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Paul Gosar and Brandon Struck and many notable, upstanding, awesome patriot Americans who were also speaking about free speech issues and constitutional issues, whether that was related to the election of 2020 or otherwise. Dr. Gold had been, she was known for speaking on medical freedom and constitutional freedom, particularly as it related to COVID restrictions and lockdowns. So she'd been speaking about that prior, and she was invited as a guest speaker to that audience. Obviously there was going to be over 1 million people there, and that was important because she's heavily censored. So she needs to be able to get the message out to large crowds whenever that's an opportunity. So she accepted that opportunity to speak there, even though political activity specifically and the election is not her subject. Dr. Gold is the founder of a 501c3 nonprofit organization that's nonpartisan and independent and simply trying to maintain the middle ground of what's trustworthy and accurate science and legal medical information. So that's what that's about. That's why Dr. Gold was invited as a guest speaker to the free speech rally, which, by the way, had a government approved permit. And that's why I was there. I was working alongside of Dr. Gold. I was providing her security support to make sure that she was safe in a large crowd of people, and providing communication support and various other things that I did for the organization with her.
Which you've done many times before.
Yes, I've actually worked as a licensed security guard in the state of California, which is my home, for years prior. That's just one of the side jobs I've done. When you're an actor, you do all kinds of jobs. So I've worked as a security guard. I've worked as a host and maitre d' for restaurants and clubs. I've done all kinds of things. Yeah, I provided security support and communications support. I do lots of writing and content creation and public relations and various things. So yeah, I've done a lot of different things, and I just tried to bring all of the skills and abilities that I could to support the efforts that she was doing and that America's Frontline Doctors were doing in order to bring truth and transparency to the American public, and to inform them and to empower them to reclaim their constitutional rights and their God-given rights, which no one should be taking away from them, and no one has the right to take away from them. So that was our mission and our purpose, and that's why we were in Washington, D.C. on January 5th and January 6th. So January 5th.
And you've done...
Oh, go ahead.
But you've done security for Dr. Gold before, accompanied her, escorted her, provided her security. And just so people know too, I mean, it's hard to see in these little boxes, but you're very tall, you're very fit, you're muscular. I mean, this isn't like, it's not like you're some puny guy who's trying to, get away with saying, oh, I was there to do security. I mean, it's legitimate. Like, this is what you have done and did.
Yeah, that's definitely what I've done even prior to meeting and working with Dr. Gold. And it's definitely what I've done ever since I've worked with her. So like I said, she's a very notable speaker, and there's a lot of demand for her to speak and inform people about the medical truth. And so we've done many events prior to Jan 6. And so I'm always close by, and I'm always taking care of her physical safety and also just assisting her with whatever she might need. So I did a lot of different things for her, but security was definitely one of them. And I was very cognizant of that going into Washington, D.C. It's a big city. And of course, we were going into an event where we knew there was going to be an extremely large number of people. And there were going to be a lot of government agencies and police, directing traffic. And so I was just being conscious of making sure that we complied with all the laws and all the rules, making sure that we did everything properly and appropriately as we should.
Well, and let's remember too that this was January 6th was actually the third major rally that had happened in Washington, D.C. after the election. There was one in November, there was one in December, and then there was one on January 6th. And each of them brought, people have different estimations, but anywhere from many hundreds of thousands. Some people estimate over a million people. And at the first two in November and December, many people, including older people, including mothers with small children, were actually physically attacked on their way home from these events by Antifa members, by counter protesters with different groups. So the security threat was a very real thing. And
absolutely,
look, it's not my place or my job to speculate why different people made different choices that they made on January 6th. I'm not trying to do that. But I will say, I certainly have heard people say, well, why would anyone go to the Capitol on January 6th wearing a mask or a gas mask or a helmet or, different things like that? And I honestly, to me, it made absolutely perfect sense, because I was like, we've just come off of two major rallies over the last 2 months. where people who showed up just to hold a sign and chant and be a part of something special were getting the hell kicked out of them when they were trying to make it back to their hotel after the event was over. So when I saw people on that day wearing helmets or wearing a mask, because people Antifa and different groups were spraying pepper spray at people, they were spraying gas at people, and it didn't seem unusual at all to me, honestly, that anyone was wearing a helmet or a mask or anything else. And so it makes perfect sense to me that, of course, if your job was there to escort Dr. Gold, that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, and I agree. I agree with you. I remember seeing a lot of the gear of various types. And I mean, there were literally well over 1 million people in the city that day. That's the largest crowd I've ever been in my entire life. And I've been in a lot of large crowds, but that was massive. Just, you can't even describe how massive it was. It was crazy. And so you saw every manner of dress and different types of gear, but it didn't strike me as odd at all. And as you said, the entire crowd was totally aware that it was very likely, more or less guaranteed. It was a matter of when, not if, that Antifa and other violent extremist insurgent groups were going to be troublemakers, because that's what they do and they live for it, especially when a large group of people that represent classical American values and America First values and constitutional, defense, when those kind of people gather, that's when Antifa and troublemakers live for causing trouble and attacking those people and trying to incite violence. When our entire point is that all of us should have an opportunity and a platform to think and to speak freely, peacefully, but freely. And so we're pushing to have our freedom and our right to speak and to think. And then these people who claim to be defending democracy are physically attacking us for our simple right to stand up and say what we think and what we believe.
Right.
So Jan 6 was definitely one of those times on a larger scale. And yeah, people were aware that Antifa and troublemakers were likely to come at some point, but we were so committed to the importance of exercising our rights and defending constitutional values and standing up and saying that we don't agree with what's happening, or we don't believe that this was fully transparent or legal, or whatever the complaint might have been. It really doesn't matter what it is, because it's America. You're allowed to complain about whatever you want, period. No exceptions. You're an American. You get whatever opinion you want, no matter how ridiculous it is. It's your life, it's your opinion, and it's sacredly protected by God and the Constitution with no caveats.
Well, I want to address one thing too, and then we need to get you inside the Capitol. But but what I want to address is that the media, the left-wing media, has the narrative about January 6th seems to seems to shift inch by inch every day. And initially, of course, it was an insurrection, and we'll get into that in a moment. But now, I think also with the help of the January 6th committee, the narrative is now that it was an attempt to overthrow democracy, and the narrative seems to be that this was a organized, violent coup with the goal of going in and installing Donald Trump as the president, even though he wasn't. So I just want to address, and I'm only speaking for myself right now, and you can address this if you'd like. I know a lot of people who went to DC on January 6th. I don't know a single person who went to DC on January 6th with the intention of installing Donald Trump as the president or engaging in any sort of forceful act or violent act with an attempt to have some sort of outcome. Every single person I know, including myself, was there to protest and to rally with the message and the mission of saying that we, the people, would like a forensic audit of the vote, because we feel that there's too much discrepancy. We feel like there is too much irregularity, and we feel like there's too much division in the way that people feel about how the outcome of the election ended up. And I've always maintained from my own perspective, if Biden legitimately got 81 million authentic votes from living people who are registered voters and American citizens, great. Let's just validate and verify that, because a lot of people feel like there are a lot of things that happened that could have caused the outcome of the election to not be what we were being told that it was. And my position has always been, if the outcome that we were being told was true, I want to know that for a fact, because that means that's good information to have. If Joe Biden got 81 million legitimate votes from legitimate living American voters, then that tells us a lot of data that we need to know so that we can strategize differently for the future and try to figure out how we can do better next time. But nobody was on the same page with what was happening. And we were just expecting, at minimum, we knew at minimum 74 million people voted for Donald Trump. And so you have 74 million people who are feeling outraged and are feeling like their vote is being, or their feelings are being disregarded, and that they're kind of being steamrolled over. And it's like, how are we supposed to move forward as a unified nation when we have half the nation believing that their voice and their opinions and their feelings don't matter? And so I was there on January 6th to say, people want to be heard. And we want to have the outcome of this election validated with a forensic audit. And everyone that I know felt the same. I don't know one single person who said, we're going to storm into that building and we're going to forcefully install Donald Trump as president. I literally don't know one person who felt that way.
No, it doesn't exist. I couldn't have said it better myself, Brandon. You articulated it perfectly. I actually wrote an article for the Epoch Times about hold on to our election integrity, or hold on to our election rules, explaining pretty much exactly what you said. I published this, gosh, when was this? It obviously must have been November or December of 20, but before J6, I assume. And it's on record in the newspaper that I was saying, guys, we all have our opinions, that's fine. But the whole point of our country is that we have a set of rules that gets everyone a fair shot. It's an even playing field. So if we lose the rules, we lose the game. And it doesn't matter if your side won this time, you're going to lose next time, and it's going to be awful. We want to have rules that make it a fair playing field so that we all get behind whatever the result is. And then we all learn from it, like you just said. That's essential. It's essential for everyone. So we have to have the right information. We have to have truth and transparency. It's as simple as that. And we had nothing of the sort. We had the exact opposite. We had a whole bunch of people getting pummeled in the face and saying, shut up and believe us and don't challenge it and move on. And that's not America. That's not democracy. That's totalitarianism.
It's not America. And I also, I think a lot of people feel very confused about the notion that, somebody gets 81 million votes, which is so in excess of what others who have been the most popular presidents in American history have ever gotten. And that's fine. I'm not saying it's impossible that could happen. It certainly, of course it could happen. That's not impossible. The problem is when you've got somebody who's getting this like astronomical record number of votes and they're not even talking about it. I mean, even 2 years later, like no one's saying like Joe Biden, the most popular president in American history, the most popular politician we've ever seen. It's kind of like, don't look over here. Don't look over here. Let's just move past it. And it adds to that irritation and that agitation that people feel, that they're like, if 81 million people were so enthusiastic about this man, why are none of you talking about that? And that just makes it feel even more frustrating, I think, to people. But nonetheless, we understand how people were feeling. We understand your background. You're in D.C. to protect Dr. Simone Gold. You go to the Capitol because Dr. Simone Gold has a scheduled speaking engagement at a permitted event at the Capitol.
Correct.
How do you get there from there inside the building, and why?
So the speech that President Trump was giving in the morning went long. So we were a little bit delayed getting to the physical place to give the speech that Dr. Gold was going to give. I believe the permanent event was scheduled to start at 1:00 p.m. And I don't think we actually showed up around the Capitol grounds until about 2 p.m. But we got there. And then at about 2 p.m., there were several thousand people around, but there were tens and hundreds of thousands of people behind us, all making their way where we had just come. We actually left the speech a bit early. So there, there were probably 1.5 million people in the whole city that day, but, 1 million plus people behind us, all, the vast majority of them we assumed were on their way to the Capitol because that was the only other thing to do that day. There was President Trump's speech in the morning. And then there was this, free speech rally or whatever scheduled on the Capitol grounds at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. So that was the main second event of the day. So we arrived to give that speech. And at 2 p.m. when we showed up, someone in our group mentioned to us, hey, someone just said that they canceled all the speeches. And we were bewildered. We just thought, what do you mean they canceled all the speeches? It's like we're an hour late. We're already supposed to be speaking and everyone's here. Like there's literally 1.5 million people here to hear this speech and all the speakers are here too. So what do you mean we're not doing the speech? That didn't make any sense. It was permitted 6 weeks in advance. Everything. It's just, there was no explanation for that. It was just bizarre. And we didn't even know what to do with it. So we sat around for about 10 or 15 minutes, just sort of chit chatting like, well, maybe someone will get better information or someone will bring more to light. Like, oh, we made a mistake and you're going to go over here, or we shifted the time for this reason or whatever. I don't know. But no other information ever came, but people kept coming because like I said, there was 1 million+ people behind us all marching that same direction. So every passing minute, another 5,000 people showed up. So 20 minutes later, there was like 150,000 people and then 300,000 people. It's like massive amounts of people flowing in minute by minute. So at whatever point that the crowd had grown to the size of, I don't know, like 10 or 20,000 people or something, and they were just sort of milling about, not knowing where to go, and we didn't know where to go, they just started going towards the steps. There were no gates or stanchions or anything visibly there saying that they shouldn't be there or go there. And there were, if I can remember correctly, I think like 6 Capitol Police officers just sort of ceremonially positioned like halfway up the steps or something, or just sort of like posted there, but it was like 6 of them. And then there was, 10 and then 20 and then 50,000 people milling below them. So eventually that crowd walked up the steps up to the cops. And then they just stopped there and were talking to them.
Hang on, let me stop you for a second. Now, what side of the building were you on?
This is the east side of the Capitol.
East side of the Capitol. So this would be on the opposite side of the building as where we've seen the imagery of people smashing through windows and having these intense
climbing scaffolding and so forth.
Right. So that was on the west side of the building. You were on the east side of the building.
Yeah. So when you walk from the ellipse and go past the west side of the building, it's way out in the distance. Now you have to remember, I was walking there at like 1:30 p.m. So I don't know how much activity there was. I mean, I could see that there were some people on the lawn, but I couldn't really see how many or what they were doing. And I wasn't really paying attention because that wasn't where the speech was. That's not where we were supposed to go. And there was a lot of people everywhere. So I was mostly just focused on keeping my client safe, which was Dr. Gold, to make sure she didn't get trampled. So many people that just tripping and getting trampled, even by peaceful people, was a concern you had to be aware of all the time. There was just so many people. So that was the main issue, was just crowd control and making sure you didn't trip and make sure you weren't hitting anyone or knocking anyone over by accident, and just getting where you needed to go. So that's what we worked on. And we got our way around the left side of the Capitol as we're going in our direction to find our way to the back side of the east side steps. And somewhere in that vicinity, we were supposed to find a stage. And then once we couldn't find a stage, and then people started moving up towards the steps and the crowd got bigger and bigger, we basically realized it doesn't seem like there's going to be any stage or place where we're supposed to give this speech like we were told previously and as we'd been scheduled for weeks in advance. But there's a whole bunch of people here, and they want to be heard, and they want to participate in an expression of free speech. And that was the whole point. And Dr. Gold is here with an important speech to give. So she said, let's try to give it in some fashion. So we just moved our way towards that crowd that had gathered, and we observed that the steps of the Capitol, if you go up the steps and out to the side, either the left or the right, and we went over towards the right, I believe, there's a balcony that overlooks, the grounds. And so it just seemed like, well, there's a vantage point that people might be able to see her and realize that she's trying to gather their attention, and maybe they'll coalesce and quiet down and like focus and listen, and she could give the speech.
Now, let's take this a piece at a time. Now, at this point, was anything that you were a part of or observing, would you describe it as a riot?
Not in the slightest.
Okay. It felt like a protest.
It felt like a pre-rally. It was like a rally, but with like the anticipation, like the main event's going to happen, like a speech.
Like people didn't even know what to do. They were kind of like, we're here, but we're not quite even sure what to do.
Yeah, I always describe this as it's basically like if you were to have the Super Bowl. Okay, so everyone knows the Super Bowl. It's a huge deal. Everyone watches it all over the planet, and everyone knows it's going to happen every year. It's planned well in advance. You know, you book your tickets the year before. So then when the Super Bowl finally shows up and you've saved your pennies so you could buy these way overpriced tickets and the plane to get there, and you show up to go to the Super Bowl and you have your tickets and you get to the stadium and you climb in and you find your seat, and it's like 5 minutes to game time. Like literally they're about to do the coin toss at any minute, and you've gotten into your seat and there's tens of thousands of people streaming into their seats. And then someone's like, they cancel the game. You should just go home. They're not even having the Super Bowl. You'd be like, shut up, bro. Of course they're not canceling the Super Bowl. Like everyone's here. The whole world is here. We've all planned for this for a year. We all bought our tickets. He's like, you don't just cancel the Super Bowl at game time.
Right.
Who does that? It doesn't happen. Now, if that were to actually happen, if you were at a Super Bowl and they literally were like, no, we actually canceled it. Just go home. Do you think everyone would just like file peacefully, calmly out and not talk to each other and just be like, oh man, I got better things to do anyway? No,
Of course
they'd be
not.
kind of irritated, and they'd probably talk about it and sit there and be like, excuse me, where's the Super Bowl? Like, get this game going. So that was pretty much what happened at Jan 6 is people were just wandering around like, where's the event? Like, we're supposed to have an event to participate in here.
So at that moment, it was decided that since the speech that Dr. Gold had planned to give, we're talking about Dr. Simone Gold. And for any of you just who are watching us, please click the share button, share this interview. I'm talking right now with John Strand, who is a January 6th defendant. We're right at the point now where we're about to get him inside the Capitol and describe why this happened, what he's been charged with, and why he's choosing to go to trial instead of taking a plea deal. If you're watching this interview, please click the share button, retweet, whatever platform you're watching on, just share. Please throw comments into the comment section, smash the likes and hearts. And I'm going to be providing information on the bottom of the screen about how you can support John and his legal defense fund as we get now into the story of what happened and what happened to his life after going into the Capitol on January 6th. So you're in DC, you're there to act as security for Dr. Simone Gold, who you've worked with for a long time, you've had a relationship with for a long time. She's there to give a prepared speech. She is a scheduled speaker. The event that she's supposed to be speaking at the Capitol, you arrive at the Capitol and you're told, no, the speeches aren't happening. That event is canceled. There's no explanation at this point why. You personally haven't witnessed anyone who was on the other side of the building breaking any windows or climbing scaffolding or doing anything. So
had no idea.
You're not understanding why this event has been canceled, but you make the decision at this point to go up at the top of the steps so that Simone Gold can give her speech that she was planning to give, and you're escorting her as her security guard. And
yes. Yeah, she looked at the crowd and she said, I have to go. I have to try to get their attention and at least speak to whoever will listen. And so she made that move towards the crowd in the steps. And so, of course, I followed her because that's my job, is to protect her wherever she goes. And as she approached the crowd, I suggested to her, try to make your way up to the front, but towards this side where maybe we can get you to that balcony and get you a vantage point. Because that made sense to me, and that seemed like that could work. And that seemed like the one thing that might draw the attention of the crowd and give them something to focus on and to be productive. Because otherwise, it just seemed, I basically just assumed the crowd was going to gather and grow and fill up and sit on the steps and wave their flags and sing songs and just have a rally and whatever else. But I had no idea anyone was going inside the building or was intending to go inside. That did never cross my mind. Eventually, I could see people pressing towards the doors and that they wanted to go inside, or at least that's what it seemed like some of them did. Maybe some of them just wanted to hang out on the steps. I don't know. But I wasn't aware of what their ideas or intentions were. I just knew there was a huge crowd there that was supposed to be hearing a speech that wasn't happening. That's what I knew. And I knew that I was escorting a speaker that was supposed to give a speech. So I was trying to help her do that.
Now, at this point, were the doors now we're talking about the large Columbus doors on the east side of the building. Were they open or closed at this point?
They were closed at this point.
Okay. All right. So you make it to the top of the stairs, and what happens?
Make it to the top of the stairs. And by the time we got to about the top, we gave it our best effort, but it became clear that physically we weren't even able to make our way to that exact spot because there were just too many people and they were getting packed in tighter and tighter. And I've said this 7 times, but it's like you can't say it too many times. There were so many people there. It's insane. I've never seen that many people in one spot. And because the majority of them were by the ellipse side in the beginning, but all of them, or most of them, were making their way our direction during the course of the afternoon. So every minute that passes, there's another 100 or 1,000 people that have added to the crowd. And then every minute, another 100 or 1,000. It's just growing exponentially very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So when we got to wherever we were on the steps, we just got crushed by the sheer volume of humanity. It still wasn't a riot. It still wasn't violent or negative. It was entirely positive and boisterous and fun. And basically, my other analogy, and this is truly what it felt like, is it felt like a rock concert. So it felt like a big rock and roll show where the band is like making you wait. Their tour bus is a little late, and so the crowd's already been built up for an hour, and there's 50 or 100,000 people there packed in. And if you happen to be lucky enough to be in VIP up at the front, you're like, I'm close enough that they can spit on me, and I want to see them. So you're like pushing to get that spot so you can be close to the rock star that you love. But obviously, violence or hurting anybody is not even on your mind, and that's certainly not why you're there. You're there because you're stoked about the concert that's going to happen, and you want to be close.
Wait, I want to stop you right there because that's really, this is a perfect place, I think, to make this point. For many of us who have been ensnared into this January 6th nightmare, it's almost as though all of us are expected to answer for or pay the price for things that were happening that we didn't know about, or things that even happened after we were there. But to the point that you just made, it's one thing to be in a crowd that's getting really tight and shoulder to shoulder, and it's growing, and it's getting a little bit, you're getting a little unsteady on your feet, and it's, it's not a riot, but it's getting, you're like, oh, this is getting a little, like I'm getting a little like, how's this going to go? That's different than suddenly being like, well, why would you be in a crowd like that when this was going on and this is going on and this is going on? It's like, but you can't do that to people. You can't hold people accountable for things they didn't know at that time.
Of course.
Of course, if you see video images of somebody who's in a crowd and the crowd is kind of getting, they're getting a little, they're moving and the energy is getting a little ramped up and stuff. And then that later at certain points, people were fighting with officers or breaking windows. You're like, oh, well, you were there. You were a part of it. No, I was a part of a crowd that was getting, the energy was amping up because it was getting a little too tight. Things were getting a little too, but that's a far cry from expecting someone to shoulder responsibility for being part of a violent riot. And so, okay, so you're at this point, the crowd is intensifying, the doors are still closed, and then
there was a moment where the energy shifted dramatically, suddenly. And that's when I heard the cracking loud sound of what sounded like a bomb, which, you could feel the crowd react in panic, like, oh my God, we're under attack. And I assume that was a tear gas canister or something of that nature.
A flashbang, perhaps.
Flashbang, yeah. But something very, very violent, loud, intense, scary, and it panics you. It startles you. It startled me, but I mean, I'm trained and prepared for those kinds of things, so I'm grounded. But I could feel and hear the crowd react to that and become defensive and become panicked. That's what crowds do. That's just how it works. And that continued for some minutes, like more bangs, and I could feel the crowd pressing. I couldn't really see the police officers or whatever agents were attacking the crowd in this manner, but I could hear it and I could feel the crowd's reaction to it. And that was a sudden shift where now the energy was negative, but it had not been negative prior. And then a few minutes after that, I don't know how long, it's hard to judge time when things are intense like that, but it wasn't immediately, and it certainly wasn't a half an hour, but it was, some number of minutes where people were getting tighter and tighter packed. And there were, only 4 maybe police officers total remaining at that point that were still in front of the doors. And they just decided, like, we're going to leave and we're going to make our way through the crowd down the steps. And so as soon as they did that, the crowd immediately, honored them, because it's a very pro-police crowd. It's a very pro-law and order crowd that comes to freedom rallies and Trump rallies and all of these kinds of things. And so they were immediately trying to help these police officers go wherever they were trying to go, make sure they were safe and stayed upright and et cetera. And so once they had left, the crowd continued pressing on the doors, but they're locked, they're closed. And then at some point, the door opened from the inside, and you could see people that were behind the door, like talking to whoever the people were right at the door. I was like I was close enough that I could see it, but I couldn't hear what they were saying or really what's going on. And I was just like shouldering Dr. Gold, making sure that she didn't get trampled because it was super, super cramped and it was kind of crazy at that point. But the doors opened, and as soon as they opened and a couple people went inside, there was like a vacuum effect that just like sucked people in. And we were close enough that we got sucked and pushed in within the first, few dozen people or so. And because it was so much intensity and people behind us crushing us in every direction, especially after the police officers attacked the crowd and panicked them, it was much worse after that. And so when those doors opened and we got pushed in by force of the vacuum, I realized that we needed to follow that vacuum. I mean, we had no choice. We would have gotten trampled anyway. But the safe thing was just to quickly follow that vacuum force to a space where there was less people crushing us. Also, it was one of the coldest days I ever remember experiencing. It was freezing cold.
It was.
And because we had been outside without any warmth or shelter for, I think we got out there at 8 or 9 in the morning, and this is 2 p.m. So we had been out in the frigid cold. And I am telling you, it was so cold I could barely stand it. And we were out there for at least 5 hours at that point of freezing cold. So if you've been that cold for that long, your body temperature has lowered and lowered and lowered, and you are hurting. So there was a physical need to just get inside of shelter too. But we had no ability to go backwards. The only place we could go was forward when that door opened. So we were just pushed inside, against our own volition or will. It wasn't our intention to be inside the building. That wasn't the point of why we were there. We were trying to give a speech to the crowd. And as far as we were concerned, the crowd wasn't inside the building. The crowd was on the steps at that point. But the sheer force pushed us in, and my need to keep her safe and standing upright, she actually started to fall when we went through the door. I caught her and did my job and kept her from crashing to the ground, and then picked her up and just kept pushing her forward because I knew the intensity of that crowd behind me was not as safe of a place for her. I wanted to get her somewhere where there was space and calm, and I went straight forward to find that. And next thing I knew, we were literally in the rotunda in the Capitol.
When you were pushed into the building, and now was there a sense of relief in terms of the pushing?
Yes.
Did you feel like you were able to get your footing and kind of catch your breath? And
exactly, that's exactly how I felt. And the first thing I did once I caught her to keep her from falling and knew that she was upright and not going to trip, the first thing I did after that was observe my surroundings. So I scanned around looking for where I was, also knowing that there was a crowd behind me. So I wanted to keep moving forward. But first I scanned around who was here. And I saw government employees in uniforms, and I saw police officers in black with rifles. And they saw me, and not just me. There were dozens of people spilling in and milling about. So there were people there. There were also already people in the building, which obviously couldn't have come from the door that I just came through. So as soon as I came in, I realized, oh, there's people that have already been in here from other entrances, or I don't know, maybe they were supposed to be in here and they've been in here for hours. I have no idea, but there were people there, and there were government employees in uniform there, and there were police officers there. So I saw all those people.
How many would you estimate there were? Police
more than 2, but less than 20.
Okay.
So, handfuls.
What was their attitude at that point?
Their attitude seemed very casual. Totally
they were panicked and pushing and beating you with batons and saying, get out of here, get out of here.
Correct. Because that's what I was looking for. I was looking for, are any of the government employees or police officers like under duress or panicked? Are they giving any specific directive, or like, what's happening? And it just seemed like, oh, there's just sort of various people from various directions here doing different things, but no one seems especially upset or panicked. And it just seems like at some point they'll determine what the crowd control situation is and tell people where to go, but they weren't telling anyone where to go at that moment. So it just seemed totally logical and reasonable to just move forward. Again, there was an enormous crowd behind me that we'd been crushed in for 20 minutes, so I couldn't go there, and that wasn't safe to do anyway. And it didn't seem right to go sideways because those are like hallways and stairways into non-public areas. I wasn't like trying to go into a non-public area. I was just trying to find the safe public space to have room to breathe and to stand upright and to assess the surroundings and figure out what was going on. So that's what we did.
Was there any part of you at this point, and I'm not making a statement or a judgment about whether you were or weren't. I'm just asking, did you feel at that moment like you were breaking the law?
Oh no, I had no idea.
Okay.
I, I knew that the situation was somewhat unscripted, only because I knew there was a scheduled speech with a stage just outside the steps that was supposed to happen, and it wasn't there, but all the people were there, and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them. And then there were cops in front of the door for a while, but then they left, and then the doors opened and people were pushed inside. So it didn't seem exactly like it was organized. You'd think like, oh, if everyone's supposed to be going in the Capitol building, maybe there's like metal detectors or a process that you go through. And instead people were just like inside. But then when you got inside, you saw government employees and police officers there standing around, and they weren't hassling people or rounding them up, or like, they certainly weren't telling me to do anything. And it didn't seem like they were really giving directions to anyone at that point. So it really just seemed like this is sort of an off-scripted event, and there's a lot of people around, and they got to figure out what's going on and direct people, whenever they will. But that's not my job to do. I'm not a Capitol police officer. I'm a private citizen providing security to a scheduled speaker who was trying to give a speech and got pushed into the Capitol building. So I just made sure.
I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I think I didn't go inside the building on January 6th. And I also arrived at a different time than you did. I got there later than you did. And when I arrived, the doors were already open. But I would imagine, listening to what you're saying, for any of us who would just mentally put ourselves in a position like that, I could imagine one might feel like you're standing outside the building, you're in this crowd, the crowd is shoved forward, the doors have opened, you find yourself in a situation where it seems safer to go inside than to try to fight going inside. And so you end up inside, and you see that there are officers there, you see that there are officials there who don't seem to be aggressively panicking or telling you, get the hell out of here, get the hell out of here. And I can imagine that for many of us, the feeling would probably be, we're probably not supposed to be here. This probably isn't supposed to be happening, but it doesn't seem to be that big of a deal. So let's just figure out how to get out of here.
And actually, what I would say is that my thought was always that there were going to be more police officers and government officials coming to the facility, coming into that environment in order to give direction and to direct the crowd. Because there was, like I said, there was an enormous crowd getting bigger and bigger by the second. There was supposed to be a speech. There wasn't. The crowd pressed forward. We got pushed inside the doors without wanting to do that and without even thinking that was going to happen. That was quite bizarre, actually. But when it happened, I continued to think, okay, I don't know if I'm supposed to be in here or not. That's not what I was thinking about. I was just thinking, what's a proper thing to do? What's the appropriate thing to do and the safe thing to do? So immediately the safe thing for me was just to make sure that Dr. Gold was safe. And then after that was just to look and observe and find direction or information from an official source that would say, this is the appropriate, safe, proper thing to do. Like follow the law, follow the rules, go here, or do what we say. I was looking and waiting for that, but that did not come for the first half hour. There were just people milling about all over the place.
Right. Okay. Now, so you're inside, and I have a pretty good feel for what the vibe was like in there. But how? Okay, so we know that at some point, Dr. Simone Gold gave a speech inside the building, and what was the situation? What were you doing while she was giving a speech? And can you tell us about how long that lasted and what happened next?
So we were inside the Capitol in total for about 45 minutes or so. And so like the first half hour, I think there wasn't any specific directives from police officer or anything, not to us or, like where we were. So we stumbled into the rotunda, and we were actually it was breathtaking. I mean, I think I've been in the Capitol as a little kid when my parents took me on a field trip or something, but I don't recall being there recently as an adult. So it had been a long time since I'd been there, whenever that would have been. So it was a fresh experience and an incredible visual. It's really awe-inspiring. And I actually remember just like looking up at the rotunda itself, at the dome, and I don't know how many feet it goes up, but it's huge. And then you look back down and you see the artwork that's around, and it's just incredible. It's beautiful. So I was just struck by that, and we paused there for a minute, and we're just kind of figuring out what's happening and who's here. And we just saw like there's a whole bunch of people here, and it's just a bunch of patriots that were here for a free speech rally, and a bunch of them are now inside the building carrying their flags or their knapsacks and their red hats and whatever else they've got.
Was anybody breaking anything?
Not that I saw, no.
So nobody was running around saying, let's break stuff, let's damage,
not even close. In fact, hardly anyone was even running around. The general attitude and nature of the crowd was very calm. People were just really walking. At some point, we just, the crowd got bigger, and we just kind of moved with where the crowd was going. And so a group of people just walked their way through the red velvet ropes that sort of cordoned off walking areas. And we were also just not quite sure where we were in the building and what the layout was. We weren't familiar with the map of the building or anything.
Sure.
We understood to be in the central rotunda, but aside from that, we didn't know what went where in which direction. And we definitely had no idea what other entrances or exits there were. And we basically thought it's like not any chance of us getting out where we came from, at least not for the next hour. But who knows when the police will figure out what's going on and what they want to do. There were only 4 cops there at the East Steps. I mean, for a crowd of hundreds of thousands of people, 4 cops? Like, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous. It doesn't make sense for anything. I was so confused by that. So I was just looking for where are more police to like help and facilitate and give us directions and whatever. And so we followed a crowd through velvet ropes and we went left, I think. So then we went into this other area that had black and white tile floor. And that's, I think, called Statuary Hall, because there's a whole bunch of statues in there. It's also amazing visual and just incredible history and architecture and art. And so we just kind of noticed that. And then the crowd kept moving down this hallway past that. And we went down that hallway for a second, just wondering, like, where are people going? And is there some other exit that's more sensible for us to make our way, maybe to leave that way? But we got into a hallway that seemed to have a dead end. And eventually a police officer came to that group of people. He didn't come directly to us, but he came to a group of, I don't know if it's 30 or 50 people that we were sort of nearby. And he motioned to the crowd and said, guys, you have to go this way. There's no further direction to go in this direction. You're not going to get past these doors. And I don't even know what those doors were, but he said, these doors aren't opening. We don't want you guys to stay here. So can you please go back the way you came? Like, go back that same direction. Mm-hmm. So we did. We said, okay, well, I guess there's no exit that makes sense there. And he's telling us to go this way. So we went the way he said. And so we just kind of doubled back on our tracks. And then there wasn't any other directive from anyone for a minute or two. And so Dr. Gold at that point said, why don't you just take your phone and film so that I can give the speech to whoever will listen to it, but we'll at least document it. And we'll have, the historical moment that, I was here on January 6th for a free speech rally to give a speech. And, I was supposed to be on a stage outside, and that didn't happen. And somehow this crowd pushed me in here, but I'm going to do the best that I can to do what my job is to do and give this speech to people and tell them an important truth that I have. So John, I said,
can I ask at this point, at that moment, not after January 6th, but at that moment, did it occur to you at any point that this felt like you might be living the numerous times that left-wing protesters have gone inside of government buildings and given speeches or protested or shouted out or did a sit-in? Or was that crossing your mind, or was that not even in your mind at that point?
That wasn't even in my mind. I really was just, my mind as John Strand specifically was actually safety and just monitoring the situation, observing where are the police officers, where are the official directives, how can I comply with what they want us to do, how can I act in a safe and appropriate manner? Because I understand in larger crowds that, a little bit of chaos can start growing and go a long way. So you want as many responsible people with a calm mind to behave themselves appropriately so that it encourages the rest of the crowd to do that. So that was my main mind frame, was like, how can I behave responsibly and in a safe manner, keep my client safe, and then figure out where these cops are and what they want us to do. But like I said, there was very little communication or direction from cops for the first half hour. There were a few here and there doing things, but they didn't seem panicked to me, and they weren't coming up to me giving me any specific directions. When they did, I did exactly what they asked me to do. But that didn't happen for a bit. So when she said, let's give the speech, I just thought, well, that's a great idea, because we gave it our best effort to give the speech the way we're supposed to. And that was just prevented at every turn by various random events we never could have imagined. And now we're in here, whether we want it to be or not, and we're trying to safely get our way out. But until we can do that, it's the US Capitol. It's the symbolic starting point of our national republic. And it's the center point where Americans gather every day and every year to fulfill the sacred promise of the First Amendment that says you have the right to assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances. So, whether you're doing it at the Capitol or just generally, that's your right as an American. And so in that moment, being in the Capitol building, it seemed memorable and significant and important in terms of the symbolism. But her intent was to give that speech. It was important. Her message was life-saving, critical, truthful information, needed to be heard. And so we filmed it in that moment, because that's all we could do.
Okay, so she gives the speech, and how do you get out of the building?
So it's interesting. She starts to give the speech, and I start filming her. And, we're right in that strip where the velvet ropes are in Statuary Hall. And there's a couple of cops walking around as she starts giving the speech. And for the first 60 seconds, so the first minute or so of her speech, the cops are kind of directing some other people away from her and kind of encouraging, like, stay in the ropes and keep going this direction, but like not pushing them, but just guiding people to stay away from Dr. Gold, like to give her some space. That's what it looked like. I mean, they didn't say anything. That's just what their behavior seemed to indicate. And I was just standing there holding a phone to film her. So they didn't tell me to leave either, but they were guiding some other people to move around. So it literally appeared for the first minute like the police officers were protecting her ability to give the speech and sort of like allowing people to move by, but don't get in her space.
Wow.
Which was bizarre. But I mean, I don't know. It was bizarre. It was just like, okay, here's a person who looks like they're legitimately trying to talk to people, and they're just making sure people give her space to do that. So then after a minute of her speech, then one of the cops walks up to her and says, hey, you got to stop. Or I didn't hear him, but I assume that's what he said. And she's like holding her papers, like giving the speech, looking up at me to the camera, like really passionate, because she's a minute in and it's probably like a 3 or 4 minute speech total. So she's like just getting into it, and she's excited, and there's a crowd starting to gather to listen to her. And then the cop comes up and is like, you have to go. And she just looks up like, wait, I'm a doctor. I'm trying to give this speech. It's important. And the guy's like, no, you have to go, and pushes her. And she's like, okay. And then she walks and goes the way that the police officer says to go. And so as soon as I see that with my phone, and it's like, well, I guess that's the end of the recording. Okay, that's what the cop said. So that's what we need to do. So then I followed her, and we went the direction that the cop told us to go. And that was just making our way down that hall back into the rotunda. And once we made our way back into the rotunda, there were, 1,000 people there. It was a very full room at that point. And we couldn't actually get to the doors to leave because there's just too many people. So we just hung out by the wall in the rotunda and just imagined, we'll just chill out for a couple minutes until hopefully the crowd gets a little smaller and we could safely make our way. And then a few minutes later, a different police officer by himself walks like kind of around the wall up towards us. And he comes to me and he said, hey folks, it's getting a little calmer by the doors. And so we're asking people to make their way to the exit and actually leave the building. So please leave as soon as you can safely do so. And we said, absolutely, officer, thank you. No problem. We will do that. And so we started walking towards the door, and it took us a few more minutes to actually get out of the building because it was still congested, but it was starting to move. There was some traffic flow moving out, even though when we left the building, there were just as many people coming in. So it was very much a revolving door at that point, people going out and people going in. But it was the first time where it felt like we could actually reasonably get out. You know, the first half hour, there were just people pouring in, and you know, there was no way to get out as far as we knew.
So you got out?
Yeah, with no issue and nothing. I mean, once we got out of the building, we only walked about a few steps down, and we just stopped on the steps and met some random people that were there and just talked to the people that were around about their experience and how the day went. And there was no reason to like run away because there was no sense that anything bad had happened. It just seemed like a big, huge rally, and it got a little bit too crazy for a while. And the cops threw some tear gas bombs or flashbangs or whatever they did. I didn't understand why they did that because it didn't seem necessary, but I couldn't see or tell what they were doing. I could just hear and feel it in the crowd. But then once we got back outside of the Capitol, it was calm. I didn't hear any flashbangs going on. I didn't see any cops running around doing really anything. There were just different groups of people populated all over the steps and all over the Capitol grounds. You know, there's thousands of people everywhere. And they were just hanging out. You know, some people had speakers playing patriotic songs or singing the national anthem or playing a guitar or reading out of the Bible. And it's like, you know, just another patriot picnic, really. That was the scene.
And that would have been approximately around the same time I was there as well. I mean, I have numerous videos, which the people have never seen because during that very brief period of time when I took that video, which has now been, passed around and was used as the reason to arrest me and charge me, that's all that anyone's ever seen. But people don't really know that I actually have 13 more videos that I shot after that. And it's me just interviewing people, just walking around. And everything that you just described is exact. There was a woman with a karaoke machine who was singing songs. By the way, one thing too that I want people to understand, and I was only on the east side of the building and for a very short period of time, but everybody, except for when I got to the top of the stairs and the, infamous video that ended up getting me arrested and charged, other than the people at the top of the stairs during the 8 minutes that I stood at the top of the stairs, didn't go in the building, every other person was turned away from the Capitol. So even the people who were on all of the steps of the Capitol leading to the top were not facing the Capitol like, let us in, let us in. They were facing away from the Capitol, holding signs, singing songs, praying. The woman had a karaoke machine. I also would like to point out, and I'll probably never post these videos because I don't want to be the reason why anyone gets in trouble or gets arrested or identified or anything. But I almost wish I could, because if I were able to post my videos, what people would see is Black people, brown people, white people, gay people, transgender people. I mean, there was every type of person that you can imagine standing there, singing songs, holding signs. That was the atmosphere that I saw when I was on the grounds. But okay, so you get outside of the building, you do your thing. At some point, you leave. Now, I just to kind of reiterate, during the 45 minutes that you were inside, did you break anything, either of you?
Of course not.
Did you assault anybody?
No.
I've
never assaulted anyone in my life and don't plan to.
Okay. Did you encourage anybody to destroy anything or to hurt anybody or to behave violently?
No, in fact, we didn't encourage anyone to do anything other than encourage them to stand strong for constitutional rights when she was giving her speech. But I mean, yeah, like that was the only encouragement happening, was the speech she gave.
Okay. So
but no specific encouragement to people there in the building to do anything. I mean, we didn't know anyone that was there personally. We didn't interact with anyone there. We hardly even like waved or talked to anyone. We really kind of kept to ourselves. Her purpose was to try to get the attention of the crowd and deliver a speech. That was always the purpose. Once we got pushed into the building, my main purpose was just to identify and analyze the situation and find out what is safe, what's appropriate, where are the police, where are the exits, what's going on. And it took some time to sort that out and figure it out. And, when she said, let me film the speech, I made sure she was safe to do that. I recorded it. Whenever cops came up to us and said, we need you to move this direction, I made sure that that's exactly what we did. But we did not otherwise engage with anyone else in the building. And we did not encourage or participate in anything that anyone was doing. Although the only thing I observed people doing was milling around taking selfies and
Right.
observing the beauty of the Capitol, which I saw was awe-inspiring myself. So that's the only thing I observed. I did not observe anyone attacking a police officer personally. I did not observe anyone attacking or defacing or damaging any property. What I did see was people picking up velvet ropes if they got accidentally knocked over or stepped into. I saw people self-policing the crowd if anyone seemed to be just a little too agitated, and I would notice people saying to that person, like, "Hey, calm down. Like, we're behaving ourselves. We're doing things appropriately." That was the attitude of the crowd the entire day, and that's what I observed in the morning. That's what I observed once we got pushed inside the building, and that's what I observed once we exited the building. So.
Okay. So and for anybody who's watching right now, please click the share button. If you're watching on Facebook or Twitter, Getter, YouTube, just either retweet, click the share button. If you're watching on YouTube, copy that link, share it on your social media. Let's just try to share this interview, get it out there to as many people as possible. I'm talking with John Strand, who was inside of the Capitol for 45 minutes. He just got done telling us about being part of a crowd that was shoved when the doors were open, shoved inside, was inside for about 45 minutes, and then finally made his way out. He was with Dr. Simone Gold, acting as a security detail for her, which he's done many times before. So at this point in the story, he and Dr. Simone Gold have now exited the Capitol. They were in there for about 45 minutes. And the next thing you know, let's get to the point where you start seeing your own faces on FBI wanted lists.
Yeah, that was a real experience, let me tell you. So that would have been, I don't know if it was a day or two after that, we were just making our way back to Los Angeles for work. And the next few days, the phone was blowing up and the news media was blowing up. And there were photos circulating around of me, talking about me being a terrorist and all this crazy stuff. And I mean, at first you just think, what? I mean, what you think is, you think I was actually there. So I know what happened and what didn't happen because I was there and I saw it. So what the heck are people talking about terrorism? Like what? I mean, I've been to other political rallies where I've seen a lot more violence and damage when people just get out of control. I didn't even see anything on that scale. I mean, I saw that, there was people pushing back and forth for a while, and then the doors got open, and then people pushed inside, and whatever the cops were saying to do or not do, I don't know. We had to figure that out. But once we did, we complied with whatever the cops asked us to do, and it seemed like the crowd, by and large, was doing that. Obviously, I understand there are exceptions, and there are a few random people that are knuckleheads and don't obey the cops, and that's never helpful. But out of a crowd of 1.5 million people, I think that was the minute minority. It was like hardly anyone that was causing trouble or doing anything illegal or disrespecting a police officer. The vast majority of us are very proud of our police officers and want to support them and comply with their proper directives.
Right.
So yeah,
So
I
you
didn't have
start seeing your faces on wanted lists. You start seeing yourself in the media being reported as a terrorist. And were you scared at this point? Did you think, oh my God, they're coming for me? Or at this point, are you like,
No.
this is like almost like a joke?
It seemed like a joke. I definitely wasn't scared because I had done nothing wrong. And I still assumed that, I guess, basic rule of law was in place. So I assumed that if there were actually people that had committed real crimes, that the police would determine who those people were and handle that appropriately. But I understood clearly that the vast majority of 1.5 million people that were in the city that day, and even a vast majority of the several thousand people that ended up being inside the Capitol, the vast majority of those people didn't do anything wrong and had no intention of doing anything wrong. They were just there to support free speech and constitutional rights in America, and in whatever their political opinion is or whatever their complaint might have been that day. If that was about an election or anything else, that's fine, but that's irrelevant. The First Amendment says you have the right to petition your government for a redress of grievances, whatever that grievance is. It doesn't matter what the grievance is. You have the right to protest it. So it was a rally and a protest sacredly protected by the First Amendment in our entire Constitution.
Right,
That's
but
why
again,
people were there. That's why, you know.
understood, but at the same time, we know there were people who were breaking through windows and people who engaged in violence, and we do know that there were a lot of very illegal and unacceptable things that happened. So I'm assuming that you're not excusing that.
Yeah, no, of course. And in fact, so I didn't really understand that was happening the day of, because I didn't see it.
Right.
But in the result, the next couple of days after that, then you started seeing all this, you know, edited select footage of certain areas, which they were obviously sensationalizing. Like, oh my God, this was this giant coordinated violent event, an attack on democracy and terrorist event, and all of these ridiculous, outlandish statements. And again, you know, I saw a few things on television like, oh, that doesn't look safe and that doesn't look appropriate. Those people are not acting legally. Okay. But that's, you know, a dozen people. There were 1.5 million people in the city that day. I know because I walked past all of them. And all of the people that I saw were not attacking anyone.
Right. And so you're seeing yourself on an FBI wanted list, and you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, you know, there, an assumption must be being made that because some people at certain areas at certain times were violent and engaged in criminal behavior, that everyone's kind of being lumped in with the people who did those things. But you're thinking to yourself, I didn't do those things, so
I have nothing to worry about.
I have nothing to worry about. But what happened then when you were visited by the FBI?
Oh boy.
Tell us.
It might as well have been a movie. It literally felt like I was enacting Jason Bourne. It's whatever the most intense version of a Hollywood production you've ever seen that depicts an FBI SWAT team raid. That happened to me in Beverly Hills in Los Angeles, in a very quiet, obviously safe, normal neighborhood where that kind of stuff never happens. And it was terrifying and shocking and just bizarre.
Your door was broken open?
Broken to pieces, screaming like I've never heard screaming before. And my initial instinct was like, this must be a prank or like burglars or something totally weird, but not cool. Like, this is not appropriate. This is not normal. This is not supposed to be happening. If actual police officers needed to speak with us or you know, arrange, you know, whatever, ask us to come in or whatever, you know, they could call us. Like,
was this a SWAT team?
Yeah. I mean, full tactical gear, head to toe, red laser dot sights pointed on my chest. I could instantly sense that if I moved the wrong way, I'd be shot and killed where I stood. They were screaming. They were perspiring heavily. I could smell the body odor, and their adrenaline worked up. They were intense. They came in almost terrified, but certainly worked up as if they were fully expected to be attacked by a violent Mexican drug cartel.
Wow.
That's the way they assaulted us. And that's the physical intensity that the officers' bodies had. I could see it and smell it and feel it. I was actually totally calm. I was just sitting in the living room on a conference call working. And so was Dr. Gold.
That's a very graphic picture that you just painted, because I feel like I can imagine the perspiration and the smell and that almost like that roid ragey kind of energy probably coming from that person, where you're just like, why this? Like, what the hell?
And they're screaming at you, get away from the door, get on the ground, hands up, put your hands up, get on the ground. I mean, they're screaming louder than that, but they were screaming. They were screaming like their life depended on it. And I could smell and feel that intensity, like their life was in danger from me.
And what happened next?
I got on the ground.
Were you cuffed?
I was put in shackles, head and foot, and dragged out the door and into a car.
And taken to jail?
Yep.
And you spent 4 days in jail?
4 straight days without so much as even looking at a clock to know what time or day it was.
Did you know what you were charged with at this point?
Nope.
Did you know how many charges you were facing?
No, they shoved some papers in front of my face for a second. They never read my rights. They never gave me a phone call. They said a couple things to me. I honestly don't remember what they said. It was a chaotic moment. They shoved the paper in front of me. They shoved my phone in front of my face to, so they could unlock my phone. I was handcuffed. They took all my equipment, all my possessions. They ransacked the apartment we lived in. I didn't know that at the time because I was in the car, but when I came home 4 or 5 days later, the house was a wreck with stuff thrown all over the place. So they ransacked the house, but they dragged us out in the car, just left us in the car for a couple of hours while they ransacked the house, shoved papers in front of us. And I guess that was doing their diligence to say, like, we legally arrested you. I don't know. Nothing seemed illegal or appropriate or reasonable. And it was just insane and ridiculous. And I just stayed calm and quiet and just went along for the ride because that's all you can do. And got thrown in a jail, then got transferred to a federal facility and thrown in whatever, like high security federal detention center prison facility that they have in downtown Los Angeles. And it was 4 days later that someone, banged on the door and said, "Hey, Strand, you're leaving in an hour." And that's all I knew. I didn't know anything for 4 days. I didn't know what time it was. I didn't know what day it was. I was starting to forget how many days I'd been in there. I was about prepared to start finding some way to scratch lines in the wall so I could do like that Count of Monte Cristo thing and like figure out where my life was. I was this close to getting there. And someone knocks on the door and says, "You're leaving in an hour." I was like, at least someone told me something. Okay. And then I got out and they just dumped me on the street with nothing. And, Dr. Gold had found someone to figure out where I was and get someone to pick me up. And now here we are a year and a half later trying to pick up the pieces. But it's been, as you know, Brandon, it's been just a series of torturous punishments every minute and every day ever since then. We were immediately put on essentially what's a terrorist watch list because we weren't even able to fly on an airplane for some time. And then later when they started letting us fly, they put us through so much torture that we hardly ever take a plane because it takes an entire day to take one single flight anywhere. And it's a miserable day.
The list that he's talking about, guys, is called Quad S. I was put on the Quad S list. It takes hours of screening at the airport to be able to get on a plane. After you make it through regular security, which literally takes hours, a team of FBI or TSA agents will follow you then around the airport. Sometimes they have dogs. They'll station themselves around you when you sit at the gate. They bring special equipment to the gate. So before you board the plane, they go through everything in your bag and swab it and test it for explosive materials. They put their hands down your pants. They do this.
They full on rape you practically. It's like a colonoscopy head to toe, every inch of your body. They forcefully rub hard.
It's a lot. Yes, they do. And it's also the whole business at the gate. They do this in front of all of the other passengers when you're about to board the plane. So now all the other passengers are watching you be tested for explosive materials and all this stuff. And they are getting on the plane with you terrified, being like, "Who is this lunatic?" Okay, that's just one thing, but continue, please. What else? Tell me about some of the collateral fallout in your life. Have you been banned from payment processors, or what have you experienced? How have you been treated?
Yeah, I've pretty much been banned from everything. It's frustrating. It's heartbreaking, actually.
It is.
So for me personally, I got into this whole situation because I was so upset about lockdowns and fundamental human rights being trampled on and our constitutional rights being ignored and Americans being lied to as if we're stupid. We're not stupid, and we know what our rights are. And it just infuriates me, and it just breaks my heart. And I want to fight for innocent humans to have their rights restored and their freedoms protected. And that's why I got into this. So after Jan 6, I was targeted and assaulted and punished immensely. Within 2 days of Jan 6, my entire life was erased digitally. I was digitally assassinated. So in my life prior to the last couple of years, I've been an artist. So I've been working as a fashion model and a musician and an actor and all of these kinds of things. But my entire career is based on the ability to build an audience and an awareness for the work that I do and attract clients and represent clients. And so I have done that, enthusiastically and with a lot of passion for many years. And I built up social media followings over the years, both in music and in modeling and in acting. And so I had, a couple 100,000 followers on various platforms, and that was all erased with no trace in 2 days, like erased, never to be seen or heard from again.
Yeah.
Like those platforms, the profiles on those platforms don't exist. I lost all the material and content I created and posted on those, which Brandon, you know that well, having Walkaway destroyed off of Facebook and all those testimonials. I mean, just immense amounts of content and creativity and people's blood, sweat, and tears and their life stories and their connections that they've made together. It's like a fabric of community that's been built over time. And then they literally just incinerate that and they set it on fire and burn it to ashes in a second.
In a second.
And it's gone forever.
It's gone forever.
So that happened in my entire career and entire life. It's gone forever. It's gone.
Yeah.
I had nothing. I'd spent the last 15 years of my pretty short life building that from scratch. No one handed me anything. I came from pretty much nothing. And definitely humble beginnings. And so that was infuriating, and that was tragic, and that was heartbreaking to see all that just erased.
Well, let's take a minute right now to remind people too, because there's most certainly going to be left-wingers watching this interview right now. Later, they'll be watching it, and they will have no sympathy. They will have no empathy for anything that you're saying, because they will say, well, good, you deserve it. You deserve it. But I would like to remind everybody, no matter where you fall on the political spectrum, we do live in a country where people are innocent until proven guilty. And I can tell you from my own experience, I was in jail for several days. When I got out of jail, the first thing that I was greeted with was a note on my door saying that I had 30 days to move out of my apartment. And I did. I had to move because it had been in the news that I was a part of the insurrection. And then it was only a matter of weeks after that I was permanently banned by PayPal, Venmo, Stripe, Patreon, my donor portals. I had attorneys quit. I had my accountant quit. Not to mention all of the content, like you just said, my social media presence, my career in the media, my life went up in flames in a matter of days and weeks, when I hadn't even had a chance to address whether I was guilty or not of anything that I was accused of. Not to mention the fact that I also had my legal defense fund shut down. I was not allowed to have a legal defense fund because I was already proven guilty in the court of public opinion.
Right.
Because for standing outside of the Capitol on January 6th. So please continue.
Yeah, they destroyed and deleted pretty much everything. So my career was gone. My life was torn apart. I was evicted from where I was living. I think the FBI even came and harassed the roommate that I had at the time and scared the living crap out of him. They just turned everything upside down. I had close friends text me the day of and say, like, they said, what happened? Like, this Jan 6 thing is crazy. I heard you were there. Why were you there? And I responded to them, and I just said, I was there doing my job, and my job was to safeguard a scheduled speaker. And we just did the best that we could to give her speech. And, the program went a little off script because, things were canceled and we didn't know why, but we just did the best that we could. But most people there were safe and responsible, and we didn't see people hurting anyone or doing anything wrong. It was just a big, huge rally. And some people got pushed inside the building, which was unexpected. But once we got in, we left and it was fine. So that's all I knew that happened. So I just replied back to those people texting me, like, I didn't do anything wrong. And most of the people that I saw didn't do anything wrong. And, if you're seeing reports on the news that, like, some people broke windows or assaulted a police officer, whatever they're saying, it was 1.5 million people there. So I can't imagine there wouldn't have been a few people that were knuckleheads and, attacked a police officer. That's what happens when there's 1.5 million people in a city. like look up crime rates. You know what I mean? Like, of course someone was going to assault a police officer with 1.5 million people in the city that day. One
John,
incident was going to happen. But
tell us when you found out what you were charged with, and tell us what you were charged with.
so I was arrested on Martin Luther King Day, ironically enough, which is January 18th. And I didn't get a chance to figure out what I was actually charged with until I was released from prison after those 4 days. And maybe the week after that I got to touch base with my attorney and figure out what was going on. So.
And you're charged with 4 misdemeanors and a felony. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And essentially these 4 misdemeanors are, so they're multiple variations essentially of being in a restricted area.
Actually, there's only one for being in a restricted area. The other ones are variations on disorderly conduct.
Okay. And then tell us about the felony.
The felony is obstruction of justice for preventing an official proceeding, I think is the full title of the indictment. But it's an obstruction of justice charge, which carries a 20-year prison sentence.
Were you charged with that charge from the very beginning?
Yes.
This is one thing I'll never be able to understand. I don't think any of us will be able to understand how they're picking and choosing the people who got that charge.
Selective prosecution.
Well, yes, but again, I didn't go inside the building, and that is obviously significant, but that charge was threatened on me. My lawyer told me numerous times, it looks like they're going to offer you a plea deal, and they have mentioned that they have not yet charged you with felony he told me obstruction of Congress. It sounds like it's the same charge. And they had told him this charge carries 20 years in prison. The feeling I got was that the right decision for me was to take the misdemeanor plea deal and move forward with my life. And I do know that some people who have chosen not to take the plea deal have had that charge added later. But for you, they did it right from the very beginning.
They charged me with a 20-year felony right from the beginning, along with 4 misdemeanors with a year apiece. So I'm facing 24 years of total potential prison time for these charges. 24
years in prison. And Dr. Simone Gold was given the same charges.
Same charges.
Okay. Now, it's not for anyone to, and I'm not saying this because I took a plea deal. I truly, I'm not. But I will say it's not for anybody to judge why somebody would take a plea deal or why somebody wouldn't. Just there are very good reasons why people are making the decisions that they're making. And I will say that there are very compelling reasons why the majority of people are taking plea deals. More than 800 or 900 people have been charged, and I don't know the percentages, but I think at least 80 or 90% are taking plea deals. You're not.
No.
Why?
Well, you said there's a good reason for people to do that, and that's absolutely true in the practical sense. Pragmatically, to deal with the reality that we're facing, but the reality that we're facing is not okay. The reality that we're facing.
I'm going to stop you for a second. I see in the chats, like, people are shocked. Somebody said, did he say 24 years? Yes, 24. You heard that correctly. John's trial begins 1 week from today.
September 19th.
And he is facing 24 years in prison. Please go ahead.
Yeah, September 19th, I walk into the Lion's Den in Washington, D.C. And that's what's happening. But yeah, what I was saying is that the situation that we're facing is not legitimate. It's not acceptable. It's not appropriate. It's not honorable. It's not legal, actually. It's a constitutional violation to target and prosecute and punish certain groups of people and not other groups of people for similar actions when you are explicitly choosing who to prosecute and punish based on your desire to isolate and silence and destroy them because of their political affiliation or opinion. So we had a large walk-in event in 2018 in Congress where hundreds of people filled the congressional room while Congress was in session and sat down and prevented an official proceeding from happening. And not only did none of those people face 20-year felonies, they weren't even charged with a crime at all. They just went home with their selfies as a memento and were, I'm sure proud of themselves for preaching their opinion and speaking their First Amendment rights, which I support them speaking their First Amendment rights. I suppose that you probably shouldn't be filling the halls of Congress at an inappropriate time and obstructing official proceeding. You shouldn't do that. I wasn't doing that on Jan 6th. Most people that I know weren't doing that on Jan 6th. Most people on Jan 6th were just trying to protest and speak their First Amendment rights. But you had hundreds of people fill Congress, and while Congress was there, much more intense, potentially volatile or dangerous situation, and those people are all just let go. And then only 2 years later, they're trying to they are arresting 800 people or so and counting from Jan 6 and saying, we're going to crush you with 20 years of prison for walking around in a Capitol building when Congress wasn't even there when we were in there. And most of the people had no idea that there was an official proceeding to prevent. And that certainly wasn't what they were thinking about or interested in. They were just there to protest and listen to a speech. So it's selective prosecution. It's a violation of equal protection, which is guaranteed by the 4th and 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. Equal protection under the law. We are not getting equal protection by any means. It's completely unequal. It's completely biased. It's completely politicized. And it is utterly outrageous and shameful. It's disgusting.
I want to tell everybody. So I got sentenced in January of this year. And after my sentencing, I finally felt safe for the first time to start reaching out to other people that I had known before January 6th who also got charged. And one of those people was John. And at that point, we knew each other before, and we certainly had a friendly relationship. You've truly become one of my closest friends since January. We sometimes talk every day, sometimes for hours. And it's like I said earlier in this interview, it's very difficult for anyone to possibly comprehend or understand what this has been like, because it's so much more than charges. It's so much more than a legal case. It's the daily stories in the media that call you a terrorist, that call you an insurrectionist, that say that you went to Washington, D.C. with the intention of overthrowing the government, or starting a civil war, or trying to subvert democracy in some way, or overthrow an election. It's the cancellation, it's the banning, it's the expectation of shame and being expected to wear a scarlet letter. It's and we'll get into how our side has reacted and dealt with that in just a moment. But you and I had a conversation months ago, and you told me you were going to trial. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I said, why won't you just take a plea deal? Why won't you just take a misdemeanor and move on? You're going before. And so people understand, none of these cases is jurisdiction being released. So forget it. For those of you who don't understand, who are saying, well, just, ask for your trial to be in your hometown or your state or whatever, they won't. Every January 6th case is going before a Washington, D.C. judge and a Washington, D.C. jury. And at least as far as the juries are concerned, these are people who for 2 years have been told that this was a deadly, violent insurrection by racist Trump supporters, by bigoted people who went there to overthrow the government. And these are the jury pools. Okay, this is what John is going to be going in front of in a week. And I said, why are you doing this? Like, just take the misdemeanor and move on with your life. And he explained to me, and he can explain to you guys, that he was unwilling to do that he had to take a stand. He told me that somebody has to fight back. Somebody has to stand up for truth. And I said to him, But John, you've seen even me, who I'm a very high profile person. I've been a very beloved figure in the conservative movement. And I felt abandoned. I felt abandoned by the former administration. I felt abandoned by Republicans in Congress. I felt abandoned by the Republican Party. And I felt abandoned. And I said, John, you might take a stand and nobody cares. And what if you end up getting convicted and going to prison and nobody ever says your name and nobody ever even cares that you took this stand? And he said, I know. He said, I think that might happen. I'm prepared that I may go to prison and no one might ever care that I took this stand. But he said, I still have to do it because it's the right thing to do.
That's exactly right.
And at that point, I said to you, okay, then there's nothing left for me to do but just simply support you. And that's what I'm going to do. And so you've got my support, my full support. I'm planning to be there next week. I can only travel with permission from my probation officer, and I've been talking with her about it. And at this point, it looks like it's not going to be an issue. I will be in that courtroom every day, starting next week, and I will support you. And I really hope that other people will come and that I'm not the only one sitting in that courtroom a week from now. But go ahead and tell us why you're doing this.
Yeah, Brandon, thank you. That's amazing. I appreciate that so much. I'm grateful. I'm excited. I'm really hopeful, actually. But it's a dark time. It's a difficult time. I had to make this decision a long time ago. I decided well over a year ago, knowing what I was facing and knowing how this was playing out, knowing that the DOJ has been hijacked by partisan, bureaucrats that are totally enslaved to an addiction to power, and they care about nothing else. And I know this, so I'm not unaware. I'm not naive, but I truly believe in the absolute importance of integrity and standing firm on what is true and what is right. And so personally, I determined that I know I am completely innocent, and to accept a plea deal is to make a public statement that I'm guilty, and that would be a false statement for me. And I'm unable and unwilling to do that. I've been called by God to only bear a truthful witness, not to bear false witness. So I won't do it. And that's literally the end of the story. You can throw me in jail for 100 years. I'm still going to choose the path of standing firm in speaking the truth and not confessing to a lie, not confessing to a crime I did not commit. But beyond that, I've also observed in my life experience, and especially in the last few years, that innocent people are being obliterated by people that are not innocent and people that are not honest and people that are willing to do anything to gain their objectives at the expense of decimating and destroying other people. And I'm sick of it. And so I've noticed, particularly that right now the government heavily overcharges inappropriately and by sheer force of totalitarian strength crushes people into plea deals and otherwise accepting realities that are not their own free will and that are not in their best interest and that are not appropriate or legal or God's design for them, but they're crushed into it by a totalitarian machine. And that machine only continues to get stronger and larger and more damaging the more that it continues to grow and the more that people yield to it.
Can I ask you a question? I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I have to ask this question right now. What you're describing, do you think that it would be allowed to grow and become so weaponized and tyrannical and out of control if there were, even if not equal, if there were some sort of response from conservative media, from conservative Republican politicians, from the conservative movement in general, if there was not silence, Would this be
Brandon,
allowed to be happening?
we are the response.
Who is we?
Whoever is willing to stand up and speak the truth and stand firm for it. Whoever that is. I don't qualify them by if they have a government position. I don't qualify them by if they fit the correct or appropriate political category or religious category or, alphabet soup category or whatever. All I care about is, are you doing what's right? Are you pursuing the correct course of action? Are you sticking through it even when it gets difficult and when other people are screaming at you and attacking at you to try to prevent you from doing what you know is right? Are you doing it anyway? And if you're one of those people, you're on my team. You're on my side. You're my friend. You're my brother. You're my colleague. You're my countryman. And that's who I want to work with. And that's who I want to support. And that's who I want to contend alongside. And it should be politicians and Congress people. And I'll give a shout out to Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I respect immensely, and Matt Gaetz, and a few others that are trying to raise a rallying cry. But we need a lot more than 2 or 3 people in Congress. And ultimately, the reason we're in this jam is because Americans are just way too comfortable and apathetic and lazy. I'm just going to be brutally honest right now because it needs to happen. But this applies to all of us, right? We're lazy because we can be. We're comfortable and we like it that way. And we start to make decisions based on maintaining our comfort instead of understanding that we need to make decisions based on what's correct and what's right and what's appropriate and what's legal and what's honorable, because that's going to lead towards future prosperity and peace and our ability to be happy and reasonably comfortable. But if we worship comfort and convenience, we will sacrifice, we will eliminate our conviction and our character, the principles that we stand on, and then we will fall apart. And we are falling apart, absolutely falling apart into pieces. It's chaos, it's destruction everywhere you look. But that didn't happen overnight. That's happened over years and decades of decadence. So we can't be looking for a congressperson to come to the rescue. This is our country. It's our job to live our lives and lead them appropriately in a way that has a promise and a future and health and prosperity for ourselves and our families. We have to make those choices. We have to live those lives.
People are asking about the trial, and they're also asking how they can support you. Guys, look at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to change the graphic right now. You can go to John's website, johnstrand.com. It says donate to John Strand at johnstrand.com. It's very easy, you guys. I literally just did it tonight. I donated as well. If you go to johnstrand.com, you'll see in big red letters, it says support John or support John Strand. Click there, and it's a very easy. You can either give one time or you can give recurringly, and I believe there are options to give monthly, to give weekly, because this could go on for a while.
Yep.
I would certainly recommend giving on a recurring basis if you can. I always tell people, I know you guys think, oh, well, I can't give, I don't have that much money. If you don't have much money, $1 a month adds up if thousands of people come together and give $1 a month. If you can give 5, if you can give 10, 20, if you can give $50, $100 a month. If you can only give one time, give $100, give a couple $100, whatever you can do. I mean, I know for a fact, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees, and God forbid this trial doesn't go the way that we would hope it would. There's going to be appeals, and this is going to be an ongoing process, probably for years to come. What do you think? And people are asking how they can they listen to the trial? Can they watch the trial? Can they attend the trial? I think I know the answers, but you can go first if you know.
No, you probably have more information than I do. The trial to attend, I believe, is open. So yeah, we'd love to have good support there. That would be encouraging for me. And my lawyer said that it would be positive and helpful for the jury to see supportive and positive, upstanding Americans in support of my case. So that would be awesome. In terms of watching from the outside, I think they don't really allow much observation. I don't think they allow any televising of the trials. I'm not sure if there's audio. There may be a court audio that's available.
There is.
Yeah. So you can
Okay,
probably listen.
Right. Let me just jump in right there. And people are asking, again, look at the bottom of the screen. Donate to John Strand at johnstrand.com. So that's John has set up his own defense fund processing system on his own website. So, which is great because that means less of the money that you guys give as a gift will be taken by big tech. This is his own platform. You can go to johnstrand.com, click donate. And it's very simple. I just did it myself before the interview. It took less than a minute to do. It's very, very easy and it's very safe. I actually know the payment processor he's using. They're actually a conservative-based company, amazing people, very, very safe payment processor. So no worries there. And you can go to johnstrand.com and you'll see exactly what to do. In terms of his trial, these trials are being, there's a call-in line. Certainly, I will provide that information to you guys on my socials. John's judge is named Judge Cooper. Every judge has a different call-in extension, and I'll provide that information to you just for some reference. During all of my hearings, which there were 4 or 5 over the course of a year, there are call-in lines for all of these different hearings, and it was not unusual for there to be anywhere from 500 to 700 people on the line for all of my hearings. Almost every one of those people were left-wing haters and left-wing media. And honest to God, there were, I'd say, less than 5 conservative media outlets that were listening to my hearings, and at times when there were 700 people on the line. So that just, I just want to give you guys that perspective, because even though I couldn't see or experience the people who were calling in, just knowing that there were hundreds of people who hate my guts and are cheering for me to be convicted and put in prison, and almost nobody who loves me and cares about me listening on that line, be there. Let's give some love. Let's give some care. Let's give some support. And if you can be present in the courtroom, you should if you can. I'm going to make every effort to be there myself. In fact, I will be there, with the only exception being if I, for whatever reason, am not granted permission to travel. And I don't think that's going to happen. What do you think is going to happen at your trial?
Man, I think the truth is going to be spoken. I think the truth is going to be represented, because that's my mission and I'm committed to it. And I really just want to speak my heart to the jury, whoever they are, 12 Americans that are supposed to be my peers. I mean, obviously, honestly, if we're going to be really realistic about this, it's a travesty of justice and it's a joke. It's a total constitutional violation to be trying someone like myself in this situation in a politicized environment like in Washington, D.C. It's not at all a fair and unbiased jury of my peers. It's not even close. But at this point, I've been unable. We have filed motions claiming, reasonably, that it is not constitutional that I would be tried in this manner in this jurisdiction, and that my case should be reassigned. But the judge has declined that, because he declines everything, and they're not concerned with the rule of law. They're not concerned with fairness or observing constitutional freedoms and rights for people. They have one concern, and that's using the power that they have available to them to continue to increase and retain their power. That is their only concern, period. So I expect them to behave that way. But nonetheless, I'm still going to be in the courtroom this next week in front of 12 human beings. And I just want to share my heart with them and say, this is who I am. I love my country. I love my God. I love my brothers and sisters. And I love the free speech rights that we have that allow us to gather where we want to gather and say what we want to say, and that we hold each other accountable to have fair and lawful and transparent political proceedings and any proceedings. I mean, just that the rule of law really is followed and applied equally and honestly. That's all we want. That's all any human wants. Everyone just wants a fair shake. Everyone wants the game to be square. You don't want a rigged game in any situation. And so I would just want to represent myself to the jury that way, so that they would understand who I am and who I'm not. I'm not the terrible, awful, totally sick and fallacious, erroneous, lying crap type stories that they're telling about most of the people that were there and how they try to convince you that this day went. It's not honest. It's not real. And I'm not going to stand for it. And I'm really just sick and tired of a lot of innocent Americans being bullied and bulldozed by these lies. And that's the other reason why I'm going to trial. That's the other reason that I could have taken a plea deal and had one single misdemeanor and, probably gone to prison for a month. That's it. I'm not doing that. No, I'm not interested.
Are you afraid?
No.
Why not?
Because my future is secure. And the DC jury and the, corrupted DOJ and any of these other forces, they don't control my future. God does. That's it.
Do you think you'll be convicted?
Gosh, I'm actually wondering if I should allow myself to answer that question.
You don't have to.
Yeah, I think I should leave that a mystery. At least until I talk to my lawyer about it. But
sure. Yeah.
I have a great lawyer, and I am innocent, so I have a great case. At the same time, we don't actually live by the rule of law right now. We do not have a free and fair and safe constitutional republic. We have the visage of that, but it's been hijacked and corrupted and totally overtaken by unscrupulous and really terrible people that will stop at nothing. They will stop at nothing, and they will destroy anyone. And they definitely want to destroy me, because they've been targeting and attacking me viciously for 2 years now, and they just want to keep turning the screws tighter and tighter. So that's what I expect them to do, and I'm going to do what I can do and do what I need to do, and that is to represent myself and defend my innocence, which is truthful and real. And then we see what God does. And then, we have additional legal processes available to us, and we will use every ounce of them, and we will fight it tooth and nail until justice is finally prevailing. And I want to see that justice for all J6ers. I want to see a pardon for you, Brandon. I want to see a pardon for Dr. Gold. I want to see a pardon for anyone in J6 who was truly innocent, and most of them were. And I want to see Americans really wake up and understand that your country's going to hell unless you decide to wake up and take the reins back, because it's supposed to be your country. It's we the people. That's who is actually in power, according to the Constitution that founded the country. So it's up to us to wake up. When you were saying earlier, Brandon, about would this be different if some Congress people were speaking up, or if some people on the conservative side or whatever side were taking more action? I mean, the answer to your question is yes, but the point I want to make to people is that the cavalry is not coming to save you. I mean, obviously, let's look around at what's been happening. I mean, it's just getting worse by the minute. Really, what you should be asking is, when is the FBI going to be demolishing my front door? Because it is coming to you next. That's where it's coming. That's where it's going. That's where it's headed. And It's not going to stop unless you and I stop it. That's it. That's all we have. All we have is ourselves. All we have is what we know to be true. And if we are willing to act on it, it takes a little foresight, I guess. A little reading some history would help, because if you understand what happened before, you realize what's probably going to happen next, because patterns are common. They repeat all the time. But it takes a little foresight to realize that, I could just let this story slip past the news cycle because it doesn't really affect my life right now. I don't need this clot shot, ridiculous jab that they're pretending to call a vaccine and forcing on everyone's throats. But, I could just take it and it probably won't hurt me. But if that's how you act, if that's how you live your life, where is that going? What's that going to get you eventually? We need to think ahead. We need to think proactively.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, this is John Strand, who's going to trial 1 week from today on 4 misdemeanor charges and a felony charge of obstruction of Congress. He faces 24 years potentially behind bars in prison for the 45 minutes that he entered the Capitol on January 6th, entered against his will, or certainly was not his will to go inside, but he ended up inside, and that's where we are. If you'd like to support, it's on the bottom of the screen here. Donate to John Strand at johnstrand.com. You can go to his website. John has a support fund set up, and you can use that support fund to support his legal defense. I would like to believe that people will be supporting your content and your art and everything else when you're acquitted.
Yes. We got big plans, Brandon. We got a lot of exciting stuff coming. So I hope people get excited about that. And yeah.
I think people do probably want to know if we could get an inside scoop on how Simone Gold is doing. People read that she was released a few days ago from prison. Is there anything you can tell us?
Absolutely. Dr. Gold is doing tremendously well. She's in great spirits. She maintained really good spirits throughout the entirety of her sentence. She spent 45 days in a maximum security federal prison, essentially, because they accommodated all levels of security clearance. So that's actually utterly disgusting and illegal, and just it's just insane. She wasn't guilty. I can say that because I'm not taking a plea, so I know who was guilty and who wasn't. And Dr. Gold is a brave, courageous, innocent woman who's been attacked viciously by many, in the government and out of the government. And she won't back down because she knows what the truth is, and she knows it's worth standing for and fighting for. I always like to say that the future is only what you fight to make it. And Dr. Gold has been leading the fight for medical freedom and just an authentic pursuit of truth and transparency for several years now. And she's just getting started. So she's in good spirits and she's in good health. And she's taken a few weeks to just kind of rest and recover and get herself prepared for the next chapter in the next season, which is going to be really exciting for her. And there's going to be huge things coming in the freedom movement. There's going to be huge things coming from goldcare.com. If you understand how corrupted the medical system has become, and that's no understatement or overstatement, it's a cesspool, and it's a tool of death. So you should extricate yourself from that system entirely. And goldcare.com is a great way to pursue an alternative economy in a America First freedom-minded way. And so yeah, she's doing great. And I will be obviously focused solely on this trial for the next few weeks and maybe the next few months. And I don't even know if it's going to be the next few years, because we'll appeal any unjust rulings. And there's been a lot of injustice and improper, proceedings so far. And we'll be fighting against all of those, according to the rule of law and by the judicial system that we're supposed to be, able to find real justice with. So we'll keep fighting for that, and we'll never stop.
I texted Simone yesterday or the day before, I can't remember now, and she responded. We had a brief exchange back and forth, and she had indicated that she wanted a couple of days to just recenter. And We had talked about getting on the phone on Wednesday, and I look forward to that. I'm sure a lot of people know there was a horrible thing in my case where documents were leaked, and the left-wing media and people who just want to maximize as much damage as they can possibly do tried to kind of create this story that there's an enormous rift or something going on between she and I don't believe that that's true. And at this point, it seems like it's not true because we're talking, and I hope that we have a great conversation this coming week. And
Definitely not true. Fake news.
Yeah, fake news. And in time, when she's feeling better and had gotten her footing back, she and I can address some of those things down the road. I suppose we should start closing out. I just want to encourage everybody once again, please contribute to John's support fund. You can go to johnstrand.com. It's right there at the bottom of the screen. Donate to John Strand at johnstrand.com. It's very easy. It took me less than a minute to go there, click support on his website. It walks you through the steps. You can give one time, or you can give recurringly if you want to give on a monthly basis, if you want to give on a weekly basis. Again, this is going to be going on for a long time, likely. And there may be appeals, there may be an ongoing process. He certainly could use your financial support. Please find a way to give that to him. But in addition to that, give your emotional support. John, I want you to tell people in a minute how they can follow you, how they can keep up with you in any way. If you're able to come out and support in Washington, D.C. next week, please do it. If you can't, please be following me, because I'll be providing you the call-in number so you can call and listen. You know him now. This is, I hope that he's made an impression on you. I hope that in this short period of time, you see him as a person, and a person that you care about, and you feel invested in this, and you feel invested enough that you want to be there, and that this means something to you, and that you want to listen and follow this case, because you should. Tell people how they can follow you.
Yeah, so social media is interesting because I got erased, and it's quite a game. But I have a proper verified channel on Truth Social, which is safe. So you can find me on Truth Social at John Strand, and also on Getter at John Strand. You can follow my Telegram, which is at John Strand USA, and I have a channel on Twitter called The Fury Show. So that's TheFuryShow, The Fury Show on Twitter.
Okay, well, I tried to write that all down, but you said too many things. Okay, so there's Truth Social and Getter at John Strand there at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, at John Strand on Truth and Getter, John Strand USA on Telegram and Instagram.
Okay.
And The Fury Show on Twitter.
Okay, perfect. So if you guys missed all of that, you can at least go on Truth Social and Getter and follow him, and then he'll go on Truth Social and Getter and tell you how to follow on the rest of the things. So you can put out a post tonight, John, and repeat some of those things. I am very proud of myself because I did not cry during this interview. There were a couple of times where I know I did a couple of times, and I'm going to try to get through the whole. I'm going to try not to cry right now, but it's going to be really, really hard. But I'm going to do the best I can. I just want to tell you that I literally could not have got. I mean, I know people say this, and it's a very, like, you write it in your high school yearbook, and it's cute, but I mean it when I say I could not have gotten through this last year without you. You have come to mean so much to me in my life. You're a friend. You're a brother. I truly, truly love you. And anything that I can do to help and support you, I always will. And I thank you. Thank you for being there for me and helping me get through all of this.
Yeah, you're going to make me cry, man. Yeah, I feel the exact same way. It's not just a statement or a token thing or whatever. It's like I've never even imagined experiencing anything like this, much less actually have experienced it. And it's just beyond words. And it's really horrific. It's really awful. It's incredibly painful. It's incredibly draining. And you know this, you felt it. And I hate to think of where I'd be or how I'd feel or what I'd be, without someone like you being there, like when no one else could be there or will be there. Like, you've been there. You've just not backed down from anything. You've not given any excuses. You've just been yourself, and you stuck to that no matter what. And I can't thank you enough for that. And that's all anyone really would hope for from another human. It's just to be who you are and stick to it.
Well, you're most welcome, and I mean, you always, from me, you always will be, and that's you said a moment ago something about not making any excuses. I mean, I can say it's very interesting because here we sit, two different January 6th defendants, two very different outcomes, and two very different choices that we made. And all I can say for myself is I never felt like I was in a winnable situation. To me, and I'm only speaking for myself, to me, the question was never how do I win? The question was how do I lose the least? I saw this only as a losing proposition. I felt that I had been caught up in and ensnared in something that I could not get out of, and I still don't feel like I'm out of it. I don't know if I
Right.
ever will be.
Right.
But for me, it was not a question of how do I win and how do I lose. It was how do I lose the least. And that's what ultimately influenced the choice that I made. But I think you're the bravest person I've ever known. I think you're the bravest person I've ever met. And you have nothing but love and respect for me for the choice that you're making. And I know that it could end badly. And
I do.
I have so much respect. I think that you're I think that being brave like this is heroic. I'm trying to choose my words carefully because I already know there are people are going to say, he called a J6er a hero. He called him a hero for storming the Capitol. I'm not calling anyone a hero for storming the Capitol. I'm calling you a hero for standing up for yourself and standing up for what you know and believe is true.
Right.
And not allowing yourself to be pushed around. And that's heroic.
Thank you, Brandon. I can't thank you enough. And I'm so grateful for your audience and the people supporting the awesome work that you've been doing and that you're going to keep doing and that I'm going to help you keep doing. And, that hopefully we're all going to really double down and commit to ourselves and to our country and to our Constitution that the future is only what we fight to make it. So we better get busy and we better get fierce and we better get intense. Because that's what is required right now. But it's worth it. It's worth it.
It is worth it. It is worth it, or we wouldn't keep doing what we're doing. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap up. Look at the bottom of the screen. You can follow John Strand on Truth Social and Getter. He's also on Telegram and YouTube. You can go to his Truth Social and Getter. He's going to put a post out to teach you how you can follow him on those platforms. Please support financially if you can. I'm going to show you right now how to do that. You go to donate at johnstrand.com. It's a very, very simple, quick sign up, takes less than a minute. You can follow or you can support one time, or you can do it on a recurring basis, weekly, monthly. Give recurringly if you can. This could go on for a long time. And quite frankly, even if he gets acquitted, keep supporting him. He does amazing work. You should keep supporting him anyway, even if he goes and kills it and gets acquitted next week.
Just getting started.
just getting started. To all of my fans and followers and all the great patriots out there, I love you very much. And John Strand, I love you very much, buddy.
Love you, brother. Thank you for everything. God bless America, and let's keep rocking.
All right. Patriots, I'm going to let you know how you can continue to follow and support next week. I'll be there in the courtroom unless I'm absolutely not allowed to do it. And I'll give you guys all the call-in number so that you can follow his trial as it goes on. Everyone, have a great night. God bless America. Love all of you. Good night.
Awesome.